Board, please call the roll.
Mr. Hashmi?
Here.
Mr. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Reese?
Here.
Mr. Rothman?
Here.
Mr. Casvola?
Here.
Councilman Scarpino?
Here.
Mr. Heppel?
Here.
Ms. Tujja? Here. Mayor Cohen? Chairman Taylor?
Here. The first item are resolutions. Public certification resolutions are items that we previously acted upon, and we are adopting them tonight in their formal fashion. The first application is application 18-35B, Summerhill LLC. Mr. Sachs, is this application? Oh, I'm sorry, Hidden Oak Woods. Hidden Oak Woods out here.
Yeah, that's application
18-07B.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was actually a resolution I think we had disseminated at the last meeting. We did not vote on it. I actually attached two additional exhibits to the resolution, one of which is just references the materials on file with the planning board, and the other one has all of the exhibits which were marked at the hearing. So other than that, there's no other changes to that resolution.
Okay, so this is in order.
Yes, it is.
Then, now this is an application that this planning board denied.
That's correct.
So a yes vote would be to affirm that no vote.
Just to affirm the resolution, correct?
All right, what is the board's pleasure with this resolution?
Motion to adopt.
Move, we have a second.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussing? Hearing none. Lord, please call the roll of those eligible to vote.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes vote is the denial, is the adoption of the...
Adoption of the resolution.
Resolution.
Yes.
Mr. Hashmi?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Casvola?
Yes.
Councilman Scarpino?
Yes.
Mr. Heppel?
Yes.
Ms. Tujja? No.
Ms. Tujja didn't vote in favor of it, so you don't have to vote.
Okay.
That's fine.
Chairman Taylor?
Yes. The resolution is adopted. Next order of business is our current application. We're considering this evening application 18-35B. Mr. Himmelman, I guess how I'd like to proceed is, Mr. Himmelman, if you have anything else that you'd like to wrap up.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I have is I have a closing statement.
Okay.
But other than that, I don't have any further testimony or any witnesses to
So
offer.
what I thought we would do is give you the chance to wrap up, do your closing statement, go through the resolutions, the recommendations in the staff report,
Sure.
open it up to the public, get any closing comments from our staff or members, and then take a vote.
Why, Mr. Chairman, only because I think you had closed the public portion at the hearing, so when you said open up to the public, are you?
I do. I made a decision to let the public have more opportunity.
So would you like me to proceed, or?
Please.
You know, I'll come over here. As you get older, you need glasses. Good evening, all. As you know, I'm David Hillman. I represent the applicant HD Summerhill LLC, and I apologize in advance for this closing statement, but I wanted to go through at least and highlight the issues so the board can properly deliberate and make a decision. First, I want to thank the planning board members, particularly you, Mr. Chairman. I've been on this, been living in this town for over 30 years, and appear before this board, you know, for 20 some odd years, as you are a member. And I've seen you with your abilities to interact with the public and how you handle various applicants. And I want to say personally, I want to thank you for the professional way in which you conduct these meetings. And I don't know if everyone in the public appreciates that, but I do, and my client does. I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank all the other members of the planning board as well, and I also want to thank our township staff, Keith Kipp and Lauren Norris, and the professionals, Mr. Sachs, John Krasgowski, Jim Watson, CME's planner, Malcolm Apta, for their review and analysis of this application and working with the applicant and the public, and I appreciate that. As you know, this has been a very long and involved process, and the applicant very much appreciates the board's patience, careful review, and consideration of the applicant's application. As the board is aware, this application was heard over multiple hearings held on January 23rd, 2019, and then again on February 5th, March 12th, March 27th, and April 17th, and of course this evening. Over the course of these proceedings, the applicant presented its application for the proposed project, and the board, its professionals, provided comments and input to the applicant as it relates to the proposed site plan. In addition, the public was provided ample opportunity to speak on the applicant's plan and will also voice its concerns as well. Moreover, some of the objector residents were represented by attorney Thomas Barlow, and through Mr. Barlow, the objectors cross-examined the applicant's witnesses and presented its own witnesses as well. While the applicant and some of the objectors disagreed on several aspects of the proposed project, the applicant certainly recognizes the objector's right to voice their concerns. These concerns were not taken lightly, and again, I want to thank Mr. Barlow for working on this matter, and he's a consummate professional as well. The applicant, in fact, attempted to respond and made every effort to address the issues raised by the board, its professionals, and the public, which included the site layout, the total number of residential units, traffic impact-related issues, on-site circulation, ingress and egress to and from the property, among other items. As the board is keenly aware, the applicant applied to this board for preliminary and final site plan approval and CEQA variance relief for the property, and for the record, it's known as Block 243, Lot 6.04, and of course located at 377 Chumhill Road, is designated on our tax map here in East Brunswick. The property, as you know, is approximately 10.34 acres and is located in the town green zone of the township of East Brunswick. The applicant's original application consisted of 5 three-story residential buildings for a total of 120 apartments, 96 market rate, and 24 affordable units, 1 clubhouse, 1 CVS pad site, and the bank site and associated parking. The applicant sought several variances, which I'll discuss at length and go over those. And these included building density, parking requirement for the retail, off-street parking, minimum setback from the parking, signage related to the freestanding and facade signs, and the proposed roofing for the residential buildings. However, as the applicant planner testified, the applicant's site plan is consistent with the requirements of the TG zone and is thus essentially an application as of right. In other words, it's a permitted use. The proposed project is a planned unit residential development which is permitted in the TG zone pursuant to the East Brunswick Township Ordinance, and that's section 228-118.3, and requirement for a 20% set aside for affordable housing as defined in the Township Affordable Housing Plan. The applicant, as you know, proposes to provide the required number of affordable units to be contained in the residential buildings as required by the Township Affordable Housing Compliance Plan. The board issued several staff reports which included engineering and planning comments from the board's engineer, CME, the Bureau of Fire Safety, Public Safety, Code Enforcement, Water and Sewer Utility for this application. Staff reports were issued on January 16, 2019, March 7, 2019, and also on March 22, 2019. The applicant carefully reviewed the recommendations and comments from your staff. After further review and analysis and assessment, and considering all of the comments and questions from this board and its professionals as to the applicant's original application, the applicant agreed to modify the proposed site plan. Specifically, as you know, the applicant modified its plan as follows. First, it proposed eliminating building A1 25 units and reduced the overall residential units from 120 to 96, with a continued set aside for 24 affordable units and 72 market rate units. We provided, we believe, sufficient residential parking spaces to comply with both the requirements of the residential site improvement standards and the township code requirements. In addition, the applicant's revised plan called for 14 designated Frostwood parking spaces and 1 electrical charging station are provided along the northerly access drive connecting the Chase bank pad and the residential buildings. As previously requested by this board, a proposed pedestrian access to the Frostwoods Park is also being provided at the northerly buffer line. 88 spaces were also distributed at the front of all the 4 residential buildings as previously requested by the board, and also the impervious coverage was decreased by approximately 22,000 square feet from the prior submission. And also we provided a large lawn and landscape area between the Chase and the residential buildings, which can be used for snow accumulation. This plan now provides for additional parking spaces available to the general public in an effort to allow easier access to over 2 miles of trails located in the Frostwoods Park. Presently, there is no parking available for Frostwoods on both Summerhill Road and New Brunswick Avenue, the 2 public entrances to the preserved Frostwoods Park. The applicant not only presented its revised plan, which reduced the overall density from 120 units to 96, but as indicated, also proposed to develop and construct the same number of 24 affordable units, which now exceeds the 20% set aside per your ordinance requirements. The revised concept plan was initially presented to the board at a hearing on March 12, 2019. The applicant, after receiving further input from the board and its professionals on the revised site plan, thereafter formally amended its site plan through another submission to this board on March 15, 2019, which included fully engineered site plan drawings, updated drainage report, and supplemental traffic impact report prepared by Dynamic Engineering, you know, as the applicant's engineer. At the initial hearing held on January 23, 2019, the board heard testimony from Nicholas Benoit, a principal affiliated with the applicant. Mr. Benoit explained in detail his background in real estate development of similar project which spans over 40 years. Mr. Benoit indicated that with his partner, they have developed over 10,000 multifamily units. The company's real estate involvement relates to retail real estate, office buildings, some industrial properties, self-storage, and largely multifamily. As Mr. Benoit also stated at the hearing, HD Summerhill LLC Partnership is a joint venture with its company, which is Diversified Realty Advisors, in concert and with partnership with the Hampshire companies. Our company has been in existence, meaning diversified, since around 2000, and the Hampshire companies has been in business, as he indicated, its 3rd generation, nearly 100 years. Thus, it is clear that this applicant has the requisite experience in developing these type of projects as has been represented to this board. In addition, Mr. Benoit testified the proposed residential units will be exclusively rental. Further, Mr. Benoit indicated in his testimony that the proposed development will be a luxury residential community that will have on-site property management office to oversee its operation and also to handle all leasing aspects for the residential units. In addition, the applicant's architect, Jack Raker, testified as to the floor plan and elevations for the proposed project, proposed amenities, and typical upgrades for the residential units, including all kitchens. Mr. Raker also presented an exhibit in the form of a PowerPoint presentation which depicted the typical floor plan layout for these type of residential units, the unique amenity package and amenity space, as well as elevations of the proposed residential buildings. Mr. Raker highlighted the fact that this luxury project will also have such amenities which may include a clubhouse, a fitness facility, a theater, a pet washing area, outdoor barbecue areas, and fire pits, and playground, among others. As this board is aware, in May of 2016, the township approved a settlement of litigation instituted in the Superior Court of New Jersey, which sought compliance by the township of Mount Laurel affordable housing requirements. As part of the settlement of that lawsuit, the township also approved the Township Affordable Housing Compliance Plan, which included what was previously known as the Mack Cali property, of course located at the subject site. The 2016 Township Housing Element and Fair Share Plan, which was the basis for the COA settlement, specifically recommended the subject property, to be rezoned to TG zone from the previously OP or office professional. Moreover, the 2016 housing element also stated the subject parcel has the potential to yield 120 dwelling units, with 24 units to be designated as affordable units. On November 28, 2016, the property was formally rezoned by the township through the adoption of Ordinance 16-20. Thus, the subject inclusionary property, along with the other properties designated to be rezoned and/or developed under the housing plan, facilitated the settlement of the COA litigation, which resulted in an acceptable number of affordable units. Thus, the subject inclusionary property, along with the other properties, were rezoned and/or redeveloped under the housing plan, and facilitated the settlement of the COA litigation, which resulted in an acceptable number of affordable units to the parties. As to this property, the housing element and fair share plan specifically stated as follows. The property is known as Block 243, Lot 6.04, and is 10.32 acres in area. The current zoning of the property is OP, Office Professional Zone. The property has frontage on Summerhill and Old Stage Road. Access to the site is both from Summerhill and Old Stage Road. The property is recommended to be rezoned as part of the housing element and fair share plan to TG, Town Green Zone. The TG zone permits 12 dwelling units to the acre as a planned development and is inclusionary with a mandatory affordable set-aside of 20%. In addition to the residential component, the TG zone also permits a variety of office and retail uses as part of a mixed-use development. The property currently contains an underutilized office building which was approved and constructed in the 1970s. There is an existing parking field behind the building which abuts a wooded buffer area to the west and wooded green acres to the north. The property does not appear to contain wetlands or other environmental constraints. The tract has the potential to yield up to 120 dwelling units, with 24 units designated affordable at a gross density of 12 units to the acre. Moreover, at the time of the rezoning of the subject property and the adoption of the township housing element and fair share plan in 2016, concerns with regard to the buffer requirements of the TG zone were raised by residents, particularly those who lived along Francis Road near the property. In an effort to address the concerns as to the buffer requirements for the subject property, the Township Council in East Brunswick introduced an ordinance amendment establishing a buffer of 150 feet where the property in the TG zone abuts a residence or residential development. By Township Ordinance 16-25, adopted on December 12, 2016, the East Brunswick Township Council created a 150-foot landscape vegetation buffer in the TG zone. In addition, the ordinance provides that the buffer shall be established within a dedicated conservation easement. Clearly, at the time of the rezoning of the property, the impact to adjacent residential properties in Frostwoods was addressed by the township. In fact, the Township Council responded to the objections raised by residents who reside in close proximity to the subject site and adopted that ordinance, creating the 150-foot buffer to ensure that Frostwoods Park, including the trees and all vegetation, would be permanently preserved through the dedication of a conservation easement. This applicant is subject to this conservation easement restriction, and thus the 150-foot buffer requirement will be adhered to. In addition, as the applicant testified, Frostwoods is an amenity which will be offered to the residents who live in the proposed community. At the same time, will be open to the public to utilize without restriction. Many of the objectors have indicated that while they do not object to affordable housing per se, they believe the property is not the right location for this proposed project. The designation of this property was carefully reviewed and analyzed by the Township of East Brunswick at the time of the rezoning to include the property within the TG zone in an effort for the Township to meet its affordable housing obligations. In fact, this board adopted a resolution recommending to the mayor and council the rezoning of the property on November 16, 2016. In reviewing the minutes from your November 16, 2016 meeting, it was clear that any further development of this property would be subject to site plan approval, which would also include a traffic study and fully engineered design plans to be submitted as part of any application filed by a developer. Certainly, the traffic impact of this project was the subject of much review and discussion by the board, its professionals, and members of the public. The applicant presented its findings and conclusions set forth in the traffic impact study report prepared by Dynamic Traffic, dated September 12, 2018 for this application. The applicant's traffic expert testified that the traffic counts were conducted during peak AM and PM timeframes, both during week and weekends at the intersection of Summer Hill and Old Stage Road, as well as at the existing site driveways and 7-Eleven driveway opposite the site on Summer Hill Road. The traffic study provided the results of the traffic data collected through these peak times, which measures how many cars turn at the subject intersection, the timing of the vehicles proceeding to the traffic signal at the intersection of Summer Hill and Old Stage Road, and the length of queue vehicles at the subject intersection waiting for the signal to change. As set forth in the traffic impact prepared by Dynamic, the following improvements were proposed to the existing roadway. Access to the site is proposed via 2 full movement driveways along Summer Hill Road and 1 driveway that will restrict left turn egress along Old Stage Road. Also, a 2-way center left turn lane will be provided along Summer Hill Road, which will improve, in the applicant's view, traffic operations. The applicant's engineer testified presently that the overall intersection operates at level service of D, and thus the applicant will substantiate, and has, that there will be little traffic impact from the proposed development project, assuming that the office building is fully occupied. Moreover, the applicant presented testimony that the study concluded on that with respect to Summer Hill Road, that the proposed south driveway will be improved and operate at a level service C, which is improved from the current service level in part due to the addition of the 2-way center left turn lane. The applicant's traffic engineer presented its findings and conclusions that with the addition of this 2-way center turn lane, the overall traffic impact along Summer Hill Road will in fact be improved after the construction of the proposed project. In addition, the overall traffic impact from the proposed project and the intersection of Summer Hill Road and Old Stage Road, in the traffic engineer's opinion, would not be adversely impacted. As noted in the staff report, the board's professionals agreed that the traffic impact study prepared by Dynamic was prepared in an acceptable manner, and the following intersections were studied: Summer Hill Road and Old Stage Road, Summer Hill Road and North Side Driveway, Summer Hill Road and South Side Driveway, Old Stage Road and Site Driveway, and Summer Hill Road and 7-Eleven Driveway. In addition, and most importantly, the applicant also obtained, as you know, approval from Middlesex County Planning Board, which included an extensive review of the traffic impact from this project. Part of the County Planning Board approval, the county approved the applicant's proposed planned roadway and site improvements for the project. As part of the county approval, the applicant agreed to a dedication right-of-way from the existing property, which will allow for the continued buffer to exist along Summer Hill Road. The applicant has not taken the traffic-related issues lightly. In fact, as you know, it retained a qualified traffic engineer who carefully analyzed the existing traffic patterns and developed specific recommendations in consultation with Middlesex County to improve the existing conditions, the access points from the site, and the intersection of Summer Hill and Old Stage Road. While the board agreed that the jurisdiction of the traffic review as it relates to Summer Hill Road intersection lies with Middlesex County Planning, the applicant willingly agreed to, and in most cases accepted the recommendations of your board's traffic consultant. In fact, in the staff reports dated January 16, 2019, and revised March 22, 2019, prepared by CME, provided 7 pages of recommendations and comments regarding the proposed traffic impact.
as to the comments in the report, CME experts agreed with the expected trip counts listed in the dynamic traffic study. However, CME recommended the applicant's engineer perform additional traffic counts at the intersection of Old Stage and Somerville Road. At the request of the board, at your February 5th, 2019 hearing, updated traffic counts were performed by the applicant. At the request of the board, the applicant, traffic engineer, and the board's traffic consultant from CME, Jim Watson, met at the property on Wednesday, February 13, 2019. Additionally, Mr. Watson was present during the counts of the critically weekday morning and weekday evening time periods. Based upon the updated traffic counts, the traffic volumes were very similar to the prior counts and overall between 2% and 5% lower than those utilized in the preparation of the original traffic impact study. Additionally, the extended traffic count time periods confirmed that the roadway peak hours were captured in the initial traffic counts utilized in the original study. It was confirmed during the February 13, 2019 meeting and a site visit that queue lengths on Somerville Road extend past the intersection widely. However, to address this concern, the applicant engineer proposed do not block intersection signage and related markings at the southern Somerville Road driveway. The applicant believes this will better facilitate left turn lanes at the driveway during weekday evening peak hours when queuing from the adjacent traffic signal extends beyond the driveway location. Two design options were presented, and the final design was developed in consultation with Jim Watson and his staff from CME and incorporates their suggestions regarding the striping plan and signage. In addition of this striping, provides a further improvement over the existing access configuration in addition to the proposed relocation of the access point further from the signalized intersection, the provision of a two-way center left turn lane, and the reverse traffic flow of office versus residential traffic as described in the applicant's engineer's testimony. The applicant, after submitted a formal letter dated March 15, 2019, which provided the updated traffic counts performed. The applicant's traffic engineer presented the findings of the new traffic counts also at the meeting of March 27th. Mr. Watson did a review of the existing traffic concerns and proposed traffic improvements at the March 27, 2019 hearing, and Mr. Watson stated at that meeting, the queue is really an undesirable condition out there, and that needs to be addressed. And it's an existing undesirable condition. And the way that it's being addressed is through the center turn lane, through the do not block the box striping, the addition of the southbound right turn lane, and the restriction of the left out of Old Stage Road. Mr. Watson further stated, I believe the applicant looked at the timing adjustments on the signal, and with the amount of volume on Old Stage and the amount of volume on Somerville, you take time from one phase and give it to the other. And it is just one movement suffers more than the other. So this is really where they arrived with this plan. I don't take any exception to the testimony that was offered this evening. And again, it's referring to our traffic consultant. In addition, both Mr. Watson and the applicant's traffic engineer agreed that the reconfiguration of the northern driveway along Somerville Road and the distance from the southerly driveway along Somerville Road is appropriate to allow motorists to safely exit the site, given the gap created along Somerville Road with the proposed striping. In addition, the location of the northerly driveway along Somerville Road permits residents from the proposed development to exit without having to circulate throughout the proposed property, including the CVS and Chase Bank. As Mr. Watson stated at the meeting of March 27, 2019, he said, quote, comfortable with this configuration as opposed to a modified version. In addition, the Township Police Department did review the revised plan and noted in their review memo of April 10, 2019, the Department of Public Safety is in agreement with the addition of the do not block painted striping at the southern driveway of the plaza, and it does enhance safety and the ability for motorists to exit and enter the site. I want to just go over briefly the variance relief. As you know, pursuant to the municipal land use law, the applicant sought several C2 bulk variances. The statute provides, in part, as it relates to bulk variances, C2 particularly, where an application or appeal relating to a specific piece of property, the purposes of this act, for the purposes of educational facilities, construction, and financing act, would be addressed by a deviation from the zoning ordinance requirements and the benefits of the deviation which substantially outweigh any detriment, grant a variance to allow departure from the regulations pursuant to Article 8 of this act. As you know, the C2 variance is also known as the flexible C variance. This application involves a showing to the board that the granting of the variance will benefit the community. In order to show this, one must demonstrate several elements. One, the variance is needed for the specific piece of property. The proposed variance advances the purposes of the municipal land use law, which is your positive criteria, and the benefits of the deviation from the local zoning ordinance resulting from the granting of a variance which substantially outweigh any detriment. The variance will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance, which, as you know, is your negative criteria. The applicant presented planning testimony through its planner, John McDonough, to provide expert opinion on the justification of the bulk variance relief sought for this application pursuant to the municipal land use law. Initially, Mr. McDonough presented an exhibit which depicted the development of the neighborhood area which surrounds the subject property, as well as the existing office building which is currently located on the property. In addition, the exhibit presented reflected the existing 150-foot buffer, which Mr. McDonough indicated is the buffer which the applicant is preserving and integrating same in the proposed site plan. Mr. McDonough noted that it is a benefit to the project that the woodlands included within the property boundary are being preserved. Mr. McDonough made the point that the property as it exists today is underutilized, even though it's developed with an office building. Mr. McDonough also stated in his testimony that the vicinity within the subject property has been developed for substantial residential and non-residential, and thus the applicant's proposed mixed-use plan is appropriate given the existing land use pattern in the area. Mr. McDonough further reiterated his testimony that the proposed use is permitted in the TG zone. Moreover, Mr. McDonough stated that the site was included in the 2016 housing element and fair share plan for affordable housing, which was to be counted toward the township's affordable housing obligation. Mr. McDonough then discussed the bulk C2 variances that this applicant seeks relief as part of this application. Mr. McDonough reviewed the bulk variances sought and described the positive and negative criteria and identified the variances as off-street parking, off-street parking for the retail, the landscape buffer composition, the building density, off-street parking, and signage for CVS and Chase Bank, and some other design waivers, which I'll address in a minute. Mr. McDonough, during his testimony, after describing the nature of the variance sought, provided the justification in his testimony. Mr. McDonough stated during his testimony, the legal basis for the relief that the applicant is seeking here falls under what we call the flexible C balancing test, where we look at the benefits of the application as a whole, weigh them or balance them against the public detriments. On the positive side, again, looking at the application as a whole, provision of affordable housing is a paramount public interest. It is a Supreme Court mandate. This carries significant weight for this application in consideration of all the relief that the applicant needs. This is an identified site under the Affordable Fair Share Plan and your housing element. This new development here will also add viability and vitality to an underutilized site at a prominent corner in your community. And the overall site is going to be improved from a visual standpoint. Attractive buildings, very lush landscaping, and again, adding life to an underutilized property. As to the minimum setback requirement from parking and the distance between parking lots and dwelling units variance, Mr. McDonough testified that the 10-foot separation is maintained throughout the entire development, except for where there are driveways. Therefore, the applicant's planner noted It only makes sense that there needs to be connectivity between the driveway and garage space that it will enclose. As to the off-street parking for the retail, Mr. McDonough testified that the overall parking requirements of the development are met, as we provide ample parking, 284 spaces, and the parking for the 59 spaces is more than adequate for the CVS alone. As to the building density, Mr. McDonough testified it is more efficient to ensure the affordable housing requirements are met. Some of the buildings, while above 20 units in one building per ordinance. Thus, Mr. McDonough believed, for the reasons that the relief sought, this variance is justifiable. As to the variance for the number of parking spots, where the applicant provides 284 versus 50 per the ordinance, the planner provided testimony that, in his opinion, the standard and intent of the ordinance has been met here by providing interior landscaping and breaking up of the property to create the effect of pods. As to the landscape buffer requirement, Mr. McDonough indicated that the 150-foot buffer around the perimeter of the property provides a soft edge to this development to lessen the impact to the residents. Thus, Mr. McDonough, in his opinion, pointed out that even though the applicant provides only 30 versus 59 trees as the buffer, the intent of this ordinance is clearly met with maintaining the 150-foot buffer. As to the variance relief for CVS and Chaseback signage, Mr. McDonough explained that freestanding signs promote roadside recognition and are consistent with the surrounding road signs. The building signs are tasteful, he said, blend with the building, and do not constitute sign clutter or overbranding, as they are also provide a navigation aid throughout the property. As to the design waiver variance for the requirement for load area screening, Mr. McDonough testified that since the overall perimeter of the property will have the sufficient buffer, the interior of the loading area is not necessary to be screened to meet the intent of the ordinance, and the buffer clearly mitigates any impact from the lack of screening to the loading area. As to the waiver for the building mounted lights, which are not permitted in the zone, both Mr. McDonough and our engineer, Brett Scoutins, testified that all lighting will be shielded in a downward direction and will not create any spillage onto adjacent property, and further complies with the foot candle requirement throughout the property. Moreover, the lighting provides safety measures to ensure that the property is sufficiently lit at all times. Finally, there is a variance being requested, as you know, for the pitch for residential roofs, where the applicant is proposing flat roofs for the residential buildings. Mr. McDonough explained that the flat roof is fairly typical for this type of multifamily building. The planner, again, Mr. McDonough indicated, and also our architect, that flat roofs provide a good balance, good proportion, and good aesthetics for the overall building design. As to the positive criteria, Mr. McDonough testified that the proposed project as a whole provides multiple public benefits, including affordable housing. The provision of the affordable housing, as he indicated, is a mandate from the Supreme Court. In addition, the affordable housing component is considered an inherently beneficial use, where such as an inclusionary site is needed to comply with the township's affordable housing obligations. In addition, the new development adds viability and vitality, as he said, to an underutilized site, and the overall appearance will be upgraded with attractive buildings and landscape. Mr. McDonough then referred to the fundamental purposes of zoning and the township master plan, and he referred in his testimony to purpose A. This is new housing, new commercial uses, and promotes the public good and general welfare. Purpose I, which attractive development promotes a desirable visual environment. And lastly, purpose M, a planned unit development which promotes compact, efficient use of land. As to the negative criteria, Mr. McDonough testified that the benefits of the deviation from the zoning ordinance resulting from the granting of the variance will substantially outweigh any detriment. Specifically, Mr. McDonough stated the variances sought here have little or no public impacts. Again, Mr. McDonough concluded that the board has the authority to grant all variance relief pursuant to the flexible seat balancing test, and the benefits of the application as a whole substantially outweigh the detriments. The applicant does not have to show hardship under the flexible seat balancing test. In this particular case, Mr. McDonough testified that the heavy weight of the public interest of affordable housing outweighs any minor deviation based on the variance relief sought. In the end, this applicant contends it has met its burden of proof as to the variances sought, and respectfully requests this board to approve the application for preliminary and final site plan and all variances for the proposed development. And I thank you for listening to my long and close. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, just a comment. I guess Mr. Himmelman's definition of a brief closing statement.
I apologize.
And I'm going to advise the board that any of the comments made by either Mr. Barlow in his closing statement and by Mr. Himmelman in his closing statement are not evidentiary, nor are the opening statements evidentiary. The only thing that's evidentiary is the testimony that you elicited over the course of these several years. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I think we want to move to the recommendations. Begin. You don't have to read all the detail unless the applicant takes exception to the recommendation, and then we can discuss it. Then we'll discuss it as it.
Mr. Chairman, you're correct, and I think just for purposes of following through, we're going to be referring to the March 22nd
Correct.
Yes.
report, and I think the recommendations start on page 6. So I'm going to have our engineer, Mr. Skappinitz, go through and just note where there may be exceptions or issues he wants to clarify, but I believe you'll find the majority, if not most, of the recommendations are acceptable.
Mr. Himmelman, why don't we start with on page 6,
Yes.
recommendation number 3 and 4.
Hi, this is Brett Skappinitz, Dynamic Engineering for the record. So to that page 6, yes, items 3 and 4, we will agree to comply.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind me, I'll just go through it real quickly, that's fine. Recommendation 8.
What is it?
What is it?
We don't have that.
I'll read it, that's fine. I apologize. Let me read recommendation 3. Recommendation was the applicant should provide structural stability calculations for proposed retaining walls greater than 4 feet in height prior to endorsement of the site plans. The applicant has agreed to that. Recommendation 4, fences should be proposed adjacent to the entire length of all proposed retaining walls greater than 2.5 feet, and the applicant has indicated that they'll comply with that. Recommendation 8 states that the applicant should provide a breakdown of impervious areas to demonstrate the maximum impervious coverage of 50% indicated. Mr. Skappinitz, I'm assuming that's acceptable?
Yes, and we provided that testimony at the last meeting.
Okay. Recommendation 9, a loading space at least 15 feet wide and 60 feet long should be provided for the Chase Bank building.
And we provided testimony indicating that no loading space is required for the Chase Bank.
Okay, thank you. Recommendation 11, the applicant is proposing concrete wheel stops at the CVS pharmacy. Concrete wheel stops are prohibited by ordinance number 192-43.E.
Yes, that's a design waiver, we believe. It can be confirmed, but we request that as a design waiver given the configuration of the sidewalk and pavement being flush in front of the CVS at that location.
John?
We in the past have not approved the wheel stops. In any case, that there are numerous pharmacies around that have used the bollards rather than wheel stops. So
So that we're not going to be inclined.
And we can agree to the bollards.
Recommendation 12, the applicant should provide testimony regarding the lack of a trash enclosure in the vicinity of the Chase Bank building.
I believe we provided testimony, but just for the record, the Chase Bank has a cleanup crew. They treat their trash as semi-confidential, so it's taken off-site. by that crew on an almost daily basis.
John, you're okay with that? Okay. 13, plan of survey should indicate the name and address of the record owner. I'm assuming you'll comply with that.
Correct.
Number 16, provide a letter of intent detailing the proposed uses, number of employees, and anticipated hours of operation for the Chase Bank.
That was provided.
Okay. 17, the applicant should indicate what facilities the proposed outdoor amenity area east of and within Building C will include on the plans.
I believe that was provided through testimony.
And also we want to include the playground area?
Correct.
Yes.
The applicant agreed.
Number 19, a 6-inch bollard detail and CVS exterior bollard detail have been provided. If the only CVS exterior bollards proposed are the van accessible ADA sign in bollards, the CVS exterior bollard detail should include the signage and be labeled as such.
We will do so, plus we will add the detail for the bollard that we just noted we will put in place of the curb steps.
21, the number of proposed parking spaces should be consistent between the Township of East Brunswick parking calculation table and the RSIS parking calculation table. It appears 200 parking spaces are depicted on the plan as indicated in the RSIS parking calculation table.
We'll agree.
All right, 22, it appears the heavy-duty pavement sections proposed for the main driveways have been eliminated from the proposed site plan. The plan should be revised to provide the heavy-duty pavement sections as previously indicated.
Will do.
All right, moving on to stormwater management, grading and drainage review recommendations. Number 3, show time of concentration flow paths and computations, and label the areas in acres on all drainage area maps for all drainage areas under existing and proposed conditions.
We will provide.
5, all existing and proposed drainage sub-areas shall be labeled for drainage area on the drainage area maps consistent with the report computations, including the total drainage area for the site.
We do believe those were already provided, but we will clarify with your engineer.
Okay. Moving on, number 11 is a request to provide a signed and sealed copy of the stormwater basin area investigation report verifying the location of the seasonal high groundwater table.
Will do.
14, provide additional top of wall elevations and ground level elevations along the northwesterly side of the site to ensure minimum 2% graded slopes away from all buildings and 2% longitudinal positive slopes along the ground level atop the wall at a minimum. Proposed ground elevations at the spot elevations along the northwestern limits of the proposed retaining wall are clearly not shown. The grading plan at the following location requires additional review for compliance with the minimum 2% graded slopes away from all buildings and 2% longitudinal positive slopes along the ground level atop the wall. And then references the grading at the northwest corner of Building B indicates a slope to the proposed Type B inlet at elevation 53.20 of less than 2%. Revise as necessary to ensure a minimum of 2% slope.
We'll agree.
All right, and B, the grading of at the northwest corner of Building A1 indicates a slope to the proposed Type B inlet at elevation 55.10 of less than 2%. Revise as necessary to ensure a minimum 2% slope.
Again, we will agree.
Okay, I'm going to give everyone a quiz on that. 18. And by the way, these are all technical engineering recommendations, so I'll go through them, but we won't bore you to death, hopefully. Number 18, provide a wall penetration detail for the proposed 15-inch pipe through the retaining wall located north of the proposed Chase Bank. Provide a similar detail for any proposed pipe penetration through the retaining walls throughout the site.
We agree.
19, indicate where fence is necessary atop the retaining wall and provide details of the proposed fencing.
We will agree.
20, provide additional TC/BC elevations at all PCs and PTs at corners of curbs and curb returns throughout the site for construction and stormwater management purposes.
We will do so.
23, provide spot elevations sufficient to depict final grades and slopes within all parking islands.
We will do so.
27, show roof drains, downspouts, and leaders with pipe type, size, elevations, cleanouts and inverts, and cleanout grates with connections to stormwater, storm sewer inlets or manholes, and details for so required.
We will do so.
35, provide details for the interconnection pipes between the type B inlets and underground detention basin.
Again, we will do so.
The existing elevation, 36, the existing elevation of the island at the southerly entranceway to the site suggests a flat slope in the pavement and unclear grading for the curb island. The grading at the entranceway to the site requires further review and design with flush curb and TC/BC and other spot elevations to illustrate adequate grading in this area.
We will do so.
All right, 37, proposed buildings B and A2 appear to have less than 2% minimum slopes to the inlet on their northerly sides. The grading in the northwest corner of building B indicates a slope from the wall to the proposed elevation, 50 feet contour, less than 2%. Revise as necessary to ensure a minimum 2% slope in response to comment 14 above.
We will review and revise as necessary.
40, provide profiles of all storm sewers.
We will do so.
46, the applicant should provide one comprehensive stormwater management report based on the removal of one of the proposed residential buildings and the revised site layout as indicated in the drainage statement data provided.
We will do so.
All right, 47, the grading plan does not indicate an ADA ramp for the handicap accessible parking spaces between proposed building A1 and the proposed Chase building, nor is it provided at the proposed handicap parking spaces outside proposed building C. Revise the grading and sidewalk design to include an ADA ramp at all proposed handicap accessible locations.
We'll review this. We actually weren't sure at that point in time whether we needed that ramp, but we'll provide it as necessary.
You're okay with that? Okay. 48, the contour indicating elevation 49 appears to be missing around two type B inlets at the proposed curb between the easterly side of the proposed CVS pharmacy and the property line along Summer Hill Road. Revise as necessary.
We will do so.
49, additional spot elevations along all ends of all ridge lines and high points should be provided on the grading plan. Spot elevations located along proposed curves and high points are necessary to show all a minimum of a 0.50 slope is provided along all curb gutters to convey stormwater to the proposed inlets.
We will have those spots.
The gutters, 50, the gutter slope along the concrete curb southwest of the CVS pharmacy appears to have a slope less than 0.50%. Revise the grading as necessary to ensure a minimum 0.50% slope from the ridge line.
We will do so.
51, contour data at the concrete island in the pavement area just east of the proposed building B are inconsistent with the proposed curb shown on the plans. The applicant shall review contour data or remove the concrete curb as shown.
We will do so.
52, proposed spot elevations along the end of the proposed driveways do not appear to meet the existing spot elevations shown on the base map. The applicant shall review the curb spot elevations at the driveway entrances to Old Stage Road and Summer Hill Road to show all proposed conditions will meet at grade with the existing roadway and curb.
We will do so.
All right, utility review recommendations. I don't believe, let me just see if there's any open recommendations. There is one, number 24.
That's correct.
The drop connection at MH manhole 1 should be external to the proposed manhole, providing detail for an external drop connection. Alternatively, the slope of the proposed 8-inch sewer main may be increased to eliminate the need for a drop.
We're going to replace the detail for the external drop.
All right, traffic review comments, recommendations. You got quite a few of them. All right, let me go through them.
Larry, I think if you concentrate on the highlighted, on the bold portions of it, many of these, although they're not
That's fine.
stricken,
Yep.
they have been addressed.
That's fine, we can do that for these.
Mr. Sachs, just if I might add, I did go through each one of those, and maybe I see that the traffic consultants here, we can agree that I think on page 19, I had circled numbers 7 and 8 to be where testimony was provided regarding those items, and I also,
All right, let me do
I
this.
believe those were the only 2 that I had circled. I believe everything else had either been provided through testimony or through revisions of the
All
plans.
right, let me just go through Mr. Griskowski's highlights then. So recommendation 3, the applicant's engineer submitted electronic files of the models on January 14, 2019. The capacity delays and levels of service for the missing intersections have been provided. That's correct, John?
Correct.
Okay. Number 4, the applicant's engineer indicated in testimony that the no-build volumes were increased by applying fully operational office building traffic volumes, and then the build conditions remove the office as no office is expected to remain on site. Correct?
Correct.
Number 5, the applicant's engineer indicated that the eastbound through right turn movements includes traffic exiting the existing office building, and that the traffic volume will be removed and not restored under build conditions due to the proposed left turn restriction at the Old State Road site driveway. Correct?
Correct.
All right, number 7. Number 7, you said, Mr. Skapinich, you have a response to, but let me just read Mr. Prskowski's comment. The board directed the applicant's engineer to perform additional traffic counts at the intersection of Old Stage Road and Summerhill Road. A representative of CME office visited the intersection during the collection of the AM peak hour traffic and PM peak hour traffic on Wednesday, February 13, to witness the development of queue lengths on Old Stage Road and Summerhill Road. It was found that the queue lengths on Summerhill Road southbound extended past the existing intersection widening, which is north of the proposed site driveways along Summerhill Road. The analysis provided by the applicant's engineer confirmed that there is approximately 561 feet of queue length on Summerhill Road southbound. The applicant's engineer proposed do not block intersection signs and related markings at the southern Summerhill Road site driveway. Operations of the Summerhill Road southern site driveway will rely on Summerhill Road southbound vehicles to obey the proposed do not block the intersection signs and markings. Operations of the Summerhill Road northern site driveway will rely on courtesy gaps to exit. These are undesirable conditions, and the applicant's engineer shall address them.
That was the subject of Mr. Paragoy's last visit here and the testimony he had provided.
All right. John, Jim, you're satisfied with that? Yes. Okay, thank you. I think number 8 is essentially the same comment we had for number 7.
That's correct.
Okay. Number 9. All right, number 9, I'll just read into the record. The parking calculation table titled Township of East Brunswick parking calculation lists the proposed number of parking spaces for the residential units as 185 parking spaces. The second parking table titled RSIS parking calculation lists the proposed number of parking spaces for the residential units as 200 parking spaces. CME's review of the revised plans indicate 200 parking spaces are proposed for the residential use. The applicant's engineer should revise the proposed parking calculation tables accordingly. It should be noted that the applicant's engineer excluded 14 Frostwoods parking spaces and 1 electric charging space from the first table. The applicant's engineer should list these spaces separately in the first table.
Yeah, we'll agree to do that.
All right, fine. Number 12. The applicant's engineer indicated that the Chase architectural plans had the height listed, but the height was not legible. The applicant's engineer should revise the architectural plan to indicate the clearance for the vehicles utilizing the proposed drive-through lane. The applicant's engineer indicated that the proposed clearance of the CVS drive-through canopy is listed on the CVS architectural plan, which lists 10 feet. The anticipated minimum clearance according to ASHTO's, a policy on geometric design of highways and streets, is 14.5 feet. The applicant's engineer should revise the architectural plan accordingly.
We are keeping the 10 feet here, and I do believe that was touched on, but the point is here, this canopy extends out only a small portion out from the building. It's only for the customers utilizing the drive-through and not in the area where trucks are going to be circulating.
That's a testimony that they are.
Okay. Fine, thank you. Number 17, the applicant's engineer indicated that the proposed concrete curb surrounding the island is mountable. The applicant's engineer should also indicate that the proposed island is mountable within the interior of the mountable curb.
Yes, it's all mounted.
Fine.
Just 1 second.
Yes.
Just, Jim, just to go back to the canopy, you said that was the testimony.
Yeah, so
Does that mean you're,
I'm okay with that. They indicated that only cars will be traveling through that area, trucks will not
okay,
be there, so I'm okay with
Okay,
what they are.
I just want to make sure you're comfortable with it, and simply acknowledging that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Number 18, the county indicated several conditions of approval in their November 9, 2018 letter as follows. The applicant's engineer is required to provide a separate striping plan at 1 inch equals 30-foot scale and a certification stating that all striping must be designed as per MUTCD. The certification has not been provided. The applicant's engineer should provide the certification.
We will do so.
The applicant's engineer is also required to depict the intersection site distance for both driveways on Summerhill Road as per the current ASHTO manual based on the speed limit, and to depict these distances on the plans. It appears the applicant engineer has complied with this condition. The applicant's engineer is required to submit a traffic simulation. We have received the traffic simulation files dated January 14, 2019, and Middlesex County final approval will be required.
Understood.
20 deals with ADA. ADA compliance issues should be reviewed relative to all curb ramps, sidewalks, and crosswalks currently proposed under this project, subject to the construction code officials' approval.
We agree.
All right. 21. The applicant engineer provided a fire truck circulation plan. However, there are no paths of fire truck access provided for the northwest site aisle, the drive-through aisle to the north of the proposed CVS, the one-way aisle to the west of the proposed CVS, and the drive-through area to the west of the proposed Chase Bank. The applicant's engineer should address these concerns.
We agree to provide those additional movements.
Okay. Number 23, the applicant's engineer indicated in their response letter that the proposed bank would not receive deliveries from a WB-62 truck and that the apartments would receive deliveries from a smaller vehicle. The applicant's engineer should provide a delivery truck circulation plan that accommodates the proposed bank and the proposed residential area.
We agree to do so.
And 25, the applicant's, and actually 25 is just a comment. All right, that's fine. 20, landscaping review recommendations. Staff recommends proposed screening for parking areas be shifted from the proposed curb to reduce damage from snow removal, road salt, and vehicle overhang where possible.
We will make the adjustments.
Number 4, in accordance with section 192-48, shade trees shall be planted and maintained by the developer, with trees to be installed on both sides of all streets. Provide street trees along Summerhill Road and Old Stage Road.
I spoke to Mr. Kuzkowski about this item, and we agreed to add additional street trees on our side of the site, not the other side of the streets.
That's correct, Mr. Sanders.
Okay, thank you. 13, revise the plans to provide replacement calculations in accordance with section 192-38. The provided calculations listed on sheet 4 of 26 do not adhere to the replacement tree value calculations as indicated above. The applicant shall revise the plans to calculate the appropriate monetary tree replacement amount to prevent confusion at the start of construction.
We agree.
14, also the value of proposed landscape material shall be deducted from the calculated amount for replacement trees. This should be provided in replacement calculations on the plans to prevent confusion during construction.
We will coordinate with CME and have that, yes.
15, the applicant shall revise the plans to space out proposed landscaping throughout the landscaped island north of the proposed CVS and in the island south of the proposed drive-through bank lanes. Also provide shade trees in the open island centrally located along Summerhill Road, just south of the central entrance drive. These 3 areas are currently empty with no landscaping and no disposition indicated. This should be revised.
This was the subject of discussion, I believe, last meeting, talking about those islands for the snow removal. We will coordinate with CME to make any minor adjustments, but obviously the key in those gaps was to allow for the snow removal placement.
16, review and revise. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we agree, we had that conversation. We'll ask them to, we'll work with them to spread the landscape.
To prevent confusion during construction, specifically for proposed shrubs for proposed building C.
We'll agree.
17, our office recommends providing landscaping at the base of the proposed sign north of the proposed Chase building to enhance site aesthetics.
We'll agree.
All right, lighting review recommendations in accordance with, well, actually, that's just a comment. Let me just see what the recommendations are. Number 2, all lighting shall be designed to provide a minimum of 0.50 foot candles and an average of 0.75 foot candles throughout all parking areas. The applicant has provided lighting in excess of this, showing a calculated average of 2.8 foot candles.
Yes, this is the subject of my testimony, I believe, at the last meeting, talking about lighting, where we are proposing the 2.8.
Mr. Sachs, we will work with the applicant. If you recall, the original lighting plan had an average of 3.8 foot candles over the site. They've gotten down to 2.8. We'll continue to work with them to try to minimize the amount of light. There's 2 factors here. There's the safety of making sure that we have the minimum light coverage, but also not exceeding more than necessary the intensity of the light, so that we're not providing a glare effect where we don't have to.
Okay, fine. All right, number 5, the applicant has indicated lighting shall be on 24 hours a day. Our office recommends that the minimum light levels be reduced at night due to the residential nature of the site.
We'll agree to a night lighting plan.
Okay.
Work with CME to develop that.
All right. And I would suggest that that plan be something that is accommodating to the residential development on site as well as the residential neighbors off-site.
Understood. Agree.
Number 6, revise the plans to provide the full manufacturer's catalog cuts and ordering information for proposed light poles to prevent confusion during construction in accordance with section 192-39E and F.
We agree.
John, just jumping back to lighting for a second. Sachs raises a good point about sufficient lighting for on-site, but deference to the residents. But I thought it was clear that there wasn't going to be any spillage off-site.
There is no village off-site. On the revised plan, I'm sorry if it's still in there, but no, the revised plans indicate there will be no facility off-site.
Thanks.
Let's see, detailed recommendations. All right, so you'll comply with the following: retaining wall, extended type B inlet, and water utility details.
Agreed.
All right. And outside agency approvals, I know that you've testified at length as to that.
Yes.
Whatever is required, you'll provide. Whatever is pending, you'll provide.
That's correct.
Mr. Chairman, if you want, I'll just briefly go through the other attachments here. And I also want to go through the planner's report as well. There's a letter of January 11, 2019 from Middlesex County Office of Planning stating that all site plans and subdivisions are subject to review by the board, so it's still subject to final review. There's a memorandum from our code enforcement officer requesting the removal of a discarded jacuzzi, a light that needs to be repaired. I'm assuming the applicant will agree to that,
Yes.
if they haven't done so already.
I think it's already been removed.
Okay, good. Taxes are current. Recommendation from the Bureau of Fire Safety. I'm assuming you'll comply with any requests of the fire district.
Yes.
Okay. There's a memorandum from the East Brunswick Police Department, which I believe has been referred to in previous hearings. There is a memorandum from Department of Public Works, Water and Sewer Utility Division, dealing with water service recommendations, stormwater recommendations, solid waste and recycling. I'm assuming you'll comply with all of those.
That's correct. The majority of them are adding those to the plans, which we will agree to.
Letter from the Freehold Soil and Conservation District. And then I guess the initial approval dated November 5th, 2018 from the Middlesex County Planning Board. I think that might be it in terms of staff, in terms of other agency reports. Mr. Chairman, if I can just, one last thing, I just want to go over the planner's
Yes.
separate report.
Yes,
Okay.
that's also dated March 27th.
It is. All right, so looking at the planner's report, I'll go to page 2. There's a comment, and I'll just quote it. During last meeting, it was recommended that the proposed signage identifying the parking for Crosswood should stay parking available from dawn to dusk instead of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Since those are the park hours, the site plan does not reflect same and it should be revised.
And we agreed dawn to dusk.
Okay? As well, the proposal includes 2 commercial spaces, one proposed Chase Bank of 2,470 square feet, and one proposed CVS Pharmacy of 13,196 square feet. Both of these are proposed drive-through facilities. The applicant, during their previous testimony, has indicated that the proposed commercial spaces shall have typical business timings and would not be 24-hour facilities, especially in case of the pharmacy. Further from the site plan, it appears 3 uses on the site are to be separated based on lease areas. It is suggested that such lease agreement between the 3 uses should be provided to the board attorney for review, especially due to the issues related to sharing of parking, driveways, delivery timings, snow removal, and other such factors.
We agree.
All right? I guess Mr. Hillman probably should have agreed to that.
Yes.
That's all right.
Exactly. I agree with so does my
I got yeses to either side of me.
Hey,
Sorry.
you're on the roll.
Well,
let me move on. The rest of it is just tables, which have already been incorporated into the CME engineering report and plans. But I'm going to go to page 7. There's some architectural comments that were noted here, 2 specifically, and I think both of them actually came up at the last hearing. So, per section 228-118.7G9, a variance was noted for the proposed flat roofs that are not permitted. The applicant was requested and recommended to consider additional green infrastructure such as green roofs, solar panels, or other such features. There were no revised architectural plans submitted to depict incorporation of such infrastructure. The applicant did testify that the building roof shall be incorporated as white roof in order to be more energy efficient. However, the applicant should consider the possibility of incorporation of green infrastructure on site. So there's a recommendation of green infrastructure and also a recommendation that perhaps a reconsideration of the flat roofs be considered. Secondly, per section 228-118.7G10, the mixed-use center shall be a village cluster type layout, not of a linear strip center. Further, this section requires use of a unified design theme or integrated architectural design. All facades and signage shall have architectural treatment consistent with the selected design theme. The applicant should during testimony demonstrate how the proposed development meets the intent of this section of the ordinance. The proposed signage does not appear to incorporate a unified theme. Given that commercial signage is nationally branded enterprise, the applicant should indicate how a unified theme can be incorporated. So I think 3 things raised here. One of them is reconsideration of the flat roof, consideration of perhaps some green infrastructure for energy savings purposes, and then how the applicant can comply more with the intent of the ordinance in making the exterior aesthetics more compatible with each other. So those are, Mr. Chairman, I think that sums it up, those 3 issues.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me just kind of throw out my thoughts, and then I can take it to you. I think that it's pretty evident that I've struggled long and hard with this application, and I'm still struggling with it. But a couple of things that I went back and I really took a look at exactly what's the intent of the town green zone. And it really is, and I know that this isn't a linear strip mall, I grant you that, it's far from that, but we are mixing residential, and commercial uses. And I really do think that it needs to have a more town green look, a more not boilerplate architecture on the commercial parts, on the CBS and on the Chase. The signs, not only are they pretty boilerplate, but they're also oversized. So not only we get boilerplates, but you're hitting me over the head with the boilerplate. So I really, really, really dislike the idea of granting their sign variance and also just letting them be boilerplate commercial signs. And the fact that there's almost no integration visually between the residential area and the commercial areas is really weighing heavy on me. I think that pitched roofs would be more in keeping in the nature of the intent of this zone. Flat roofs, no matter how you look at it, or flat roofs, and I think, no offense to anyone who has a flat roof, but kind of chintzy looking, I guess. I'm not sure that's the best word, but in an application that's difficult for me to begin with, these were a couple areas that I thought that I really think that the board's recommendations need to be followed.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the respectful comments, and I guess we've had discussions with professionals about this, so Mr. Sapp says, oh, sorry. Turn the mic on.
Oh, sorry. In anticipation of this discussion, we've had these discussions in our prior hearings. I think with regard to the architecture and the integration between commercial and residential, I think the applicant is open to try and create some harmony there, both on facade treatment and trying to blend the two so that there is some assimilation. So I'm offering my clients, Mr. Manoy is sitting to my left, he can certainly weigh in on this also, but I would suggest that we could work with your professional staff on that issue. We did present architectural plans. Obviously, they would have to be updated and submitted to your professional staff to review. But I think we hear you on the integration and the intent of the town green zone and the planners' comments, and I think we can work to achieve that intent. And so we would ask that if the board would consider that to make it a condition of any requirement to integrate the architectural features both for the residential and the commercial. And I think that could be done tastefully as well.
Well, you know, I have the utmost confidence in staff. I've worked with them a long time.
Sure.
So that's a positive in my mind.
I was going to address your other points.
The flat roof.
The flat roof. So I understand your point, as the applicant does. The concern, obviously, I'm not saying it's not doable, because I think it is. The concern, obviously, would be to ensure that we don't exceed a height limitation of 35 feet plus up to 10%. This issue has been faced in other communities that the developer has developed in. So I think developing a pitched roof is not a foreign concept. I think we can develop that, again, in concert with your professional staff and present plans, as long as we keep it under the requirement that it wouldn't trigger a use variance.
Yeah,
So,
it would,
and I-
you can go up to 38.5 feet.
Yeah,
That's correct.
Mr. Chairman, I would also add that we worked very diligently, we felt, to try to create a very synergistic, homogeneous approach between the residential and the commercial. The commercial clearly has flat roofs. We felt that to deviate from that on the residential would be somewhat contrary to the overall homogeneous nature of the subdivision and the development. So we went with the flat roof. Additionally, it provided us the opportunity to have a white roof, which is a very energy efficient type roof versus a shingle roof, which is really not that energy efficient. Creates additional design issues and sprinkler related for fire protection up there in the gable roof and so on and so forth. So from an energy efficiency, safety, fire, building code perspective, synergistic, homogeneous approach, we felt that the flat roof was the way to go. If there is a desire on the part of the board and the community to see a gable roof, as Mr. Himmelman has indicated, we're happy to take a look at that, provided we can work within a pitch that's acceptable from a maintenance perspective, a construction perspective, and within the zoning requirement, the building codes.
I mean, I can work myself.
And again, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Sachs, we would certainly agree to that as a conditional requirement, and obviously present those plans to your professional to review. Again, I just want to make clear that we would say, as Mr. Sachs indicated, within 38 plus or minus feet. So
Let me just indicate, if you exceeded 38.5 feet, then you're triggering a D6 use variance, height variance. If you keep it below 38.5 feet, it is still a bulk variance, all right? But it's a bulk variance which actually is being recommended by our staff in order to be more consistent with the TG zone. So
I would agree with that.
So that would obviously be an additional variance you would be seeking tonight then, to go up that additional 3.5 feet.
Correct.
Over 35, okay. All right. Folks, excuse me. There'll be a public portion, all right? Okay?
But we did read your plan's comments, and we understand the intent. I think that goes, if the board's estimation, and the applicant's not disagreeing, if you think that that furthers the intent of the TG zone, we're certainly willing to provide those drawings.
Okay. Well, I still need you to address the signage.
So the signage issue in terms of specifically are you talking about the number of variances, or are you talking about because there's obviously variances for the freestanding and the facade sign, so I'm just trying to understand what the issues are.
Well, I think that while I can somewhat understand boilerplate signs, as was tenants want, that coupled with all the variances for size, I think is excessive. If you're going to have boilerplate signs, then you better make them the size and the number that don't require a variance.
I mean, I think that's again, Mr. Chairman, I understand your point. I mean, I think the overall area, the dimensional area applies, it's just a number. But I understand your point. I would just like an opportunity to speak to Mr. McCoy about that, and maybe come back to that point.
And while I think that Mr. McDonough is a terrific planner, one of the best I've heard in all the years that I've sat here, I don't buy his argument about the sites, it's for the site, and it's two on a side, and it's too many signs. No matter how you count them, no matter what side they're on, they're too big and there's too many of them. Relatively small.
I understand your point. There's the planning justification, and then there's the aesthetics and the other
I
aspects.
understand.
And that's the point you're making.
That's the point of this.
And I'm loud and clear. So I would like an opportunity to speak
Yes.
to Mr. Benoit, but we can move on and go on.
Yes.
But I think, Mr. Sachs, is there anything else you wanted to cover in the planning report?
I do, Mr. Sachs, if
Oh.
I may. There are two more issues. One, I think you already testified on page 4 about providing detailed, outdoor recreation space area that will be provided.
Yes, we will be provided.
And the second point was on page 5, which was an outstanding item as per the affordable housing requirement. It's required that in writing a plan by which very low, and moderate and
We'll
low
comply with
housing-
that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can pick that up when I was going through your report.
Good catch.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else in your report? Okay.
No, I think Mr. Sachs, okay. Mr. Brahman, you had a question or a comment?
A comment on this, at the last meeting, I had raised a question when your architect was here with regard to the flat roof as well. And at that time, I believe he explained, and when I asked that the compressor units for the air conditioners are designed to be on flat roofs. And I questioned him about the parapet, and he said it would all be protected.
Right.
If we now go to a pitch roof, are we talking about a fully pitched roof? Are we talking about a perimeter architectural pitch and still have the units on top? Or if we go to a full pitch roof, now I'm assuming you're going to have 20 to 25 separate condensers on the ground around the buildings to service all the residential units,
Yeah.
which is going to be a whole design and a site plan and things we're now going to have to consider.
Under any circumstance, we would not put compressors on the ground. So if the design element becomes a gable roof, pitched roof, there will be a notch out of it at the peak to create a flat area inside of that where those compressors would sit. Alternatively, what happens in the energy efficiency department is we would eliminate split systems for heating and air conditioning, and what's known as a magic pack unit would be used, which doesn't have a separate compressor. So once we enter into this world of change that we're discussing currently, it opens up the door to some HVAC-related issues that would change, but regardless, there will not be compressors on the ground.
And if we have the compressors then on the roof, in essence, behind, I'll call it, a pitch design, how does one access that?
There's a scuttle hole up through the building that provides access to the HVAC company to get up onto the flat roof section. Picture the gable, the peak of the roof with a notch out of it, a sawtooth out of it, that runs right down the middle of the building.
And as you said, it's accessible from the building. so
From
you're
inside
not-
the stairwell, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brahman, do you have, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have a feeling about a flat versus a gable?
I like the combination of, if we're going to do it, I would like to see the gable appearance.
Right.
A pitch pitched appearance with the notch in the middle and let them have it that way, but then sort of a balance both ways.
So,
For things that are inherently obvious to people that have been alive for more than a couple of years. You don't need to have on there that it's a pharmacy. Okay, CVS may like that, but if you go to the CVS's in the immediate area, the sign entails CVS/pharmacy. Then on the side, it says Minute Clinic. Some pharmacies have Minute Clinics, some don't. I don't think people ride around looking for the Minute Clinic. I think they go to the app, they go on the website, they call the store, and knowing that there's the nurses there or the nurse practitioner. Photo. I don't think it's necessary for a sign that says you have photo processing. So I think, in line with Mr. Our chairman has said, I think you can cut down on the signage considerably, and so there isn't any variances for signage. We're very concerned on this board, and I know you've been in hearings when we talked about putting the sign on the top of Tower 1, was it? And we went through that multiple times with the brightness and the side and going across the street and looking at it. CVS's have big, bright letters. They're intrusive. There are people that are living right across the street from there. They're in Spotswood, but I'm still sensitive to my neighbors in Spotswood. I think you know what CVS has. So I think you need to comply with, and not have any variance of signage. The need to put on that you have a drive-up window. Well, I can see you have a drive-up window, drive around the back, and most people that are coming to your drive-up window know that in advance. Likewise with a bank, 99% of the banks nowadays have a drive-up window. I think everybody knows what Chase is. I don't think you need to put up there that it's a Chase bank. It's not necessary to have a sign in the back facing the apartments that you're going to build that says Chase. I think 2 days after living there, you'll realize that that's a Chase bank. So I think the variances for the signs are ridiculous. And so that's just my 2 cents on that. I've also supplied you with the charging station ordinance that the township recently passed. I know that your application was submitted before this ordinance went into effect, but we're trying to be greener in our community, okay? So I'd like to know if you'd be willing to comply with ordinance 1906, which was...
Yes.
Okay, thank you. How many spots has that come up to? How many stations then? I know I provided this to CME this evening, so I'd like to know what that is.
So the way the ordinance is written, that is for the non-residential portion and for the residential portion. For the non-residential portion, we go by each tenant. Chase Bank would require one EVCS, electric vehicle charging station. And the CVS, because they're proposing 59 stalls, would require 2 EVCS.
And in the residential area?
In the residential area, they would require, it says 3% of all parking stalls must provide electric vehicle charging stations. So for 185 parking spaces that are proposed for the residential portion, it comes to 6.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure the record reflects that. Also, we talked extensively about snow removal on site. So you say you're going to put all your snow and keep it on site. And you're not going to, I know you said you're going to remove some, I'm sure. And I think I was clear early on. We don't like you to, I'd like to know where you're going to remove that to. You know, removing the snow, where do you put it? And my concern is also an environmental concern. When you're putting down a lot of salt, sodium chloride and stuff like that, where are you dumping this? Because I I'd be concerned if it's in East Brunswick, with all that salt in there, are you gonna test it before you drop it? What's gonna be the procedure on that? And you said there was gonna be a snow removal plan, I don't remember seeing it.
No, I think that's something that they said that they would provide, but I think that snow removal plan, Mr. Criscolo, could include information as to where they're going to dispose of that snow.
I think Mr. Sachs, we filed the revised site plan, I believe there were areas on the site, greener areas where the snow would be temporarily located, and then obviously part of our site.
No, but I think what we'd like to see is some type of written snow removal plan, which is on file with the clerk's office, stating where that snow is going to be distributed.
Sure.
Indicating, I guess,
Height,
you know, because first of all, you have to deal with site triangle issues and visibility issues or motor vehicles. So I'd ask you to come up with a written plan, have it reviewed by CME, and certainly, once it's accepted, then...
and certainly by the way your parking lot is designed, where you tuck some of the handicap parking spots in the corner, the applicant knows that putting any snow in a handicap spot, including the ancillary spot for band accessibility, is against the law. So I want to make sure that, I'm sure he knows that, so I just want to make sure, and there's going to be no parking spots taken up by snow during snow removal.
We will.
You said that in your testimony?
We will submit a written, Mr. Sachs indicated we'll submit a written report and plan as to the snow removal.
All right, and that would be in the resolution of approval if we were to move forward?
Yes,
Right?
and that plan would have to be on file with the clerk's office.
Thank you. And then we talked about...
Mr. Sachs, let me interrupt. I want to be clear just with respect to this plan. So it has been discussed on several meetings, and yes, we illustrated the areas on our site. I do understand the board members' concerns with respect to how snow, these areas, like such as the handicap stalls, we want to have snow there. We'll add notations to make clear what should or shouldn't be done with the snow. But what I will say is we're not going to know where the snow is going to be able to go until a contractor's picked. We're not going to know when the contractor's picked until after the site has been developed and constructed. We can make a note that the contractor will need to provide a plan as to where that snow will be removed, but we can't provide that information as of this time.
I understand you can't do it, that's fine.
But it appears even the spaces that you have chosen for snow to be placed, you're going to need loaders to move that snow from the residential area to the front. There's nowhere to push this snow, including the driveways. So if you're, I've been doing this for a long time, and we have, 400 miles of roadway we plow, 200 in each direction, and we know what happens with snow. It all goes into voids, and when it goes back into people's driveways, they call me, your guys pushed the snow into my driveway. Well, you know physics, that's where it's going. But you're going to be moving a lot of snow around because there's nowhere to put it in the residential portion.
Fair point, and I think from an operational standpoint, we're not going to do anything, first of all, to cover any of the handicap spaces. You're correct. Two, we're not going to do anything to affect the ability of the residents to safely get out of the property. And from an operational standpoint, we have the obligation to make sure that the snow removal is appropriately placed within the site on a temporary basis and carted off as soon as possible. So we will lay all this out in our written plan.
Okay. You also stated in your testimony regarding recycling and garbage, you'll be picking up the garbage, right?
Yes.
At your site, and
Yes.
recycling and handling that?
Yes.
And you won't be trying to get reimbursement from the township on that?
I don't know if we addressed that.
No, you will not be getting reimbursement from the township.
Understood.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other board members have questions about the letters that were read tonight? Letters from the planners, recommendations?
I think I need an answer on the variance of the signs.
And
Why don't you...
I think we're going to take a break anyway.
Okay.
So we're going to take a break now. We'll go back.
Does anyone else have questions about anything that this recommendation?
About the recommendation, not about feelings about the application. Okay, yes.
Just a clarification.
There's elevators in these buildings, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any requirement that they have backup electricity if somebody would be in this house?
Backup electricity for the building. I don't believe so.
So you're not obligated by law, if you have the elevators, that if somebody gets stuck because of the power fail? Okay, thank you.
Any other more questions? Okay, we're gonna take about a 5-minute break, at least 10 minutes, and then. Thank you all. We are having an open public portion. Here's what I'm going to ask them. We have had many meetings. If there's anyone who has not spoken but would like to be heard, I'm going to entertain and let you speak and give you your full complement of time. So is there anyone who has not spoken who would like to be heard? Okay, sure, come on up. You have to raise your right hand to be sworn. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God.
I did.
You have to state your name, you have to spell your last name, and you have to tell us where you're from.
My name is Shelley Newman, N-E-W-M-A-N. I live in the Indian Forest section of East Brunswick. I've been living here 35 years. I raise my children here. My grandchildren now come and visit. So I've seen a lot of changes in this town. But I'm still here because I love it.
Me too.
Okay, I just don't understand. You have thousands of families that are against this project. Doesn't that count for anything? Nope. I challenge you to knock on a door in either Spotswood or in East Brunswick and find one person who's in favor of this project. I challenge you, and that means nothing. With all due respect, your community is not welcome here.
I live here.
Not welcome. So I would like to know, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a traffic engineer. Traffic is going to be, my head is spinning, my head is hurting, just thinking about what we're going to be going through. It's a ridiculous plan, to be quite honest with you. It's ridiculous. How you can even consider a plan like this is beyond my imagination. So, yeah, I'm upset. I'm really upset. And it sounds like this is a done deal. So why are we here? You have thousands of people against us. How could you ask us to be here when you know that the answer has already been made?
Well, let me answer you.
Yes.
It does matter. However, let me also tell you that public opinion doesn't factor in to whether legally you can approve or disapprove an application. And I moved here in 1957, so it's not a contest. You've been here a long time.
You're longer than me.
So have I. And I can tell you that if it was up to public opinion, East Brunswick would have about 18,000 people. Because there's always a lot of public sentiment against development. And I agree with it. I think East Brunswick should stop having developments long ago, but that's not what the law says. And the planning board, we're kind of a quasi-judicial body, and we have to obey the laws that we all live under. So I can tell you that in the 20 years I've chaired this board, I have, not all that many, but on several occasions, had to support applications that I thought were not in the best interest of the town. From a livability point of view. But from the legal case I was presented, was best for the town in protecting us in all those
Chairman, honestly,
That is
do you really think that the traffic pattern that they laid out is a good idea, is a safe idea? You have children going across Summerhill Road, going into the shopping centers, the pizza place, you really think that that's going to be a safe area for our children to play and cross streets?
I'm not a traffic expert. My traffic expert said, while it's not ideal, it's safe.
And that's it.
And I believe him because I trust him and I've worked with him for 15 years.
The public has absolutely no recourse then, is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying anything other than what I just said.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Did you say it was safe? Because I think when we talked, you did not say it was safe.
I said there's undesirable conditions out there that are existing and then I listed a number of items that they had included to promote safety. I intentionally avoided saying whether it's safe or not, only because safety is something that really I don't feel can be guaranteed. There's driver judgment that's involved. But I said it was designed to standards.
So for the record, you're not saying it's safe?
I did
Well,
not.
that's not a fair
No,
question.
I'm asking about that.
It's not a fair question, Mr. Burrows.
First of all, let me respond.
Right.
And that is not a fair question, right? Because I think he has indicated that they have promoted certain conditions here which will make the project safer, right? It complies with the traffic safety standards that are applied throughout the state of New Jersey. Exactly. And I don't want anyone to lose sight of this. And ma'am, this might be the first time you've been here because I don't think I've seen you in another hearing. Okay. You know, we've had 6 hearings on this. We've probably had 20 hours of testimony. So I don't appreciate you telling this board what their function is. I think they understand what their function is.
I am a resident of this town and I can say whatever I want to say.
You can, but to come down here after these boards, I sat here for probably 20 hours listening to, by the way.
Doesn't matter.
No, ma'am, let me finish. Have listened to 20 hours of testimony from traffic engineers, from architects, from planners. We have to have considered landscaping,
Are you
lighting.
satisfied with the traffic?
Excuse me.
First of all,
I let you speak and now you can let me speak, okay? All right? The important thing that, and I think most of the members of the public who were here for the various other hearings heard me make a statement at one of the hearings, that unfortunately, the Township of East Brunswick does not have jurisdiction on Summerhill Road. It's a county road. Much to my chagrin, and I stated it at one of the earlier meetings, Middlesex County approved this project. It's in writing. It's attached to the staff report. So unfortunately, we do not have a lot of control with respect to what happens on Summerhill Road, right? That's just the way it is. Secondly, at one of the earlier hearings that was conducted at Hammersholt Middle School, when comments came up about traffic, we actually instructed our traffic engineer to go back out to the site to verify the traffic counts and to verify the traffic conditions that were contained in the traffic report prepared by the applicant. We were surprised to find out that our verification by our own engineers indicated that the counts are even less. All right? If you had been at an earlier meeting, you would know that. All right? So again, I understand this is the first meeting you've been at, all right? But understand the context by which you make statements.
Excuse me, I am a resident of this township and I deserve respect.
And you're entitled to it. Thank you.
You swear to tell the truth, all the truth, self you got?
Yes, I do.
Is this your first time speaking here?
No, it's...
Then I'm not going to let you speak. I thought I made it very clear. I'd be happy to hear anyone.
Well, it's my first time speaking on this particular
Well,
issue.
but-
No.
What issue is
sir,
that?
You
Hold
cannot...
on, wait, sir.
No.
Sir, no, wait.
Go right ahead.
I've been more than fair
Yeah.
with residents. I've heard, and I'm happy to hear it, I'm glad, I encourage it. But at some point, we need to give the people who didn't have a chance to speak their chance. And as the folks behind you.
Some of our questions haven't been answered
Exactly.
yet. I've raised questions
Sure.
meeting after meeting, and I've yet to have an answer.
Exactly.
I will be very brief.
Okay.
I'll be very brief.
2 minutes.
And thank you very much.
And I remind you, you're still under oath.
Oh, thank you very much, I appreciate that. Right, so clearly,
Your name, please?
the name is Marlon Mattis, 32 Francis Road, East Brunswick, New Jersey. So clearly, you know, this is a fait accompli, right?
Well,
So-
don't say that, that's not true. I'm not gonna let you say that, that's not true.
Well,
I don't know how everybody else.
what can the residents change at this point if it's not fait accompli? Can we change anything about what's happening?
You're talking about the scope of the project?
Well, no, just the actual movement of the project.
Well, no, the applicant has decided to present this plan.
Yeah.
This plan is now for consideration. If they wanted to present a different project, they would have said.
Okay, all right, so I know I have about 90 seconds, so I'll just move ahead. You know, I guess my point is, the last 10 minutes before we adjourned was about you're asking questions to the developer, and the developer going, yep, we're going to do it. And you're asking questions about what they're going to do, and they're saying yes, right? So we're living in
From
a
the staff.
so we're living in a world where we can't trust politicians and we can't trust vendors to do the right thing.
No, I don't, you said right, no, I don't think it's right.
No, I know I'm right. And clearly, this body knows we're right.
Certainly not gonna get in that
No.
argument.
So we're not going to get in an
But
argument.
for the record.
Okay, all right. So again, now I have 35 seconds.
You're my apology.
Okay, so how do we codify and lock in agreements between you and these people that everything that you're saying that they should do, they're going to do? You know, this handshake nonsense is...
No, sir, it's not a handshake. I'll give you,
Oh, okay, please,
I'll give you
please.
the answer, since I'm the one who can probably only answer that.
Thank you.
And it's a good question.
Any action that is taken by a planning board or a zoning board
Yeah.
in the state of New Jersey, all right, on any application, even if you were putting a shed in your backyard, has to be memorialized by a written resolution, which is then adopted by the planning board, is on file with the construction department, is on file with the planning and engineering department, is on file with the clerk's office.
Okay.
That is the memorialization of these so-called handshakes that you're alluding to. There's no handshakes. Everything is in writing. All of the agreements, all of the conditions of any application of approval are in writing.
And if they violate your, the agreement?
Correct.
What's
We have enforceability. We have the right
Can
to...
you explain to the group here how you do that?
We-
How do you stop a vendor from actually breaking agreements?
We take them to court, and I've done that many times. We take them to court. We do it all the time.
Okay.
Mr. Sachs, if I could just also add, I think, as Mr. Sachs indicated, there will be a written memorialization of any resolution with conditions. First of all, those conditions have to be satisfied. Plans have to be finally reviewed and signed off by the professional staff. And the plans are then signed by the appropriate officials, including the chairman of this board, and they're on file with the town. But the construction code official will not proceed and issue any building permits unless all those conditions are complied with. The chairman has signed those plans, the township engineer, etc. So there are levels of control from the minute any resolution is approved up until the time construction permits are filed, through the construction process and the certificate of occupancy. And even beyond that, if there are issues that are violated, as Mr. Sachs indicated, the township can go to court. So there are a multitude of levels of review and enforcement.
So what you're saying is that, and again, thank you for allowing me a couple more seconds. So if you break the agreement on whatever the element of the development is, you've already broken that agreement. Then the township
They can stop the job, for example.
Can stop the
Not
job.
issue a certificate.
Yeah, or they cannot issue a CO.
That means no one can move in,
Okay.
or subsequent, so that would just take.
Okay, because that's the only recourse we have right now, because we can't stop anything. The only thing we can do right now as a township is to keep you guys in check, to make sure that everything that you've agreed to tonight, that you've asked them and you said yes, and you said okay. That's the only recourse we have right now in our township to just make sure that, you know, this monstrosity of a project,
Assuming the application.
you know, doesn't go beyond the scope of, you know, what you guys have agreed to.
Good, very good question.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, appreciate it.
Yes.
Evening. Joy Mavora, 80 Crest Drive.
You spoke before?
Okay, no, I have not, but I've been to all of the meetings.
I need to swear you in. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
Did you get all the written statements? Just
Yes.
repeat it one more time.
MEV as in Victor, ORAH. I just wanted to ask a question because I have been coming to the meetings. I travel the roads of East Brunswick very often. I am aware of the traffic. I know you're aware of the traffic. But I do have a safety concern, and Larry mentioned about Summer Hill Road as it's under the jurisdiction of Middlesex County and not really under our jurisdiction. But I assume that the citizens of the town are under our jurisdiction, so I'm going to just ask this question. I'm just curious. When you come out of the entrance or the exit, if you will, by the Chase Manhattan Bank and attempt to make a left turn to go toward Bruce Lane, you have to cross into the new proposed middle lane, and then you have to kind of try to get over to the right lane, correct? Okay. Along with the traffic and the traffic count, this is a 40-mile-per-hour road. Now, I work at Central School. I drive home at about, I don't know, 3 o'clock, maybe, oh, not even 3 o'clock, actually. Today I got out at 3 o'clock. I actually drive home generally at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I must say, Summer Hill Road is a breeze. You drive from Bruce Lane toward Old Stage Road, and you take your 40 miles an hour. Now, there's a little bit of a hill. I think it's right in front of Green Tree, or maybe a little further. You're telling me that as these cars are shooting by 40 miles an hour and somebody is attempting to make this left into the middle, into the right, you're telling me that there isn't the possibility that Middlesex County could have blood on their hands? I mean, it's such a dangerous thing. And even if the people aren't going 40 miles an hour, even when there's traffic, are you telling me that the people are going to be courteous enough to let all of these nice people out of this development, all of these people who go and do their banking, and all of these people who come out that way, coming out of CVS, and they want to make that left turn on Summer Hill Road because they can't make the right turn on Old Stage? So everybody's coming out of that entrance, and they have to make the left, and then they have to ever so slightly merge to the right, or if they even want to make a right turn, all of these nice people, people in traffic, let them in. It's a ridiculous, crowded, ambitious plan. That being said, I'm concerned about the danger issue there. So my last question is this. There was a little addendum. I remember when your traffic expert was speaking, there was a little addendum that he left out. Remember, he read like part of the plan, part of what the police department thought. I don't know if it was the Spotswood Police Department or the East Brunswick Police Department, but one of the police departments, when he was reading this, they sort of left out a little addendum that the police wrote, sort of saying that it wasn't an optimum plan. So was anything changed? Was anything talked about?
No, I don't.
Nobody recalls that?
No,
Does
no,
anybody in this room recall that?
I don't recall that, but I do know that the East Brunswick Police did have a comment in the staff report. And their comment was they had expressed concern regarding that movement. That's still in the staff report.
So to this day, the concern remains? Okay, and Middlesex County is willing, because it's their road, to take responsibility for that?
Oh.
All right.
I don't think they're going to take responsibility, but they are the ones who have approved that.
Okay, I get it. The last thing I want to say, it's ironic that Mr. Himmelman's closing statement mentioned affordable housing at least 4 times tonight, Yet at another meeting, you showed us pictures and you spoke about all of the luxury amenities. So is it affordable luxury housing? Is that what you're building in our neighborhood? Just curious.
Well, there are no differences between the units.
I just noticed the irony that it just keeps sort of coming out almost as if it's a challenge. If you don't give us these apartments and if we don't capture the affordable luxury, the ability to do this, what's required by the township, then it's almost like a challenge. It feels to me almost like a challenge. I just wanted to say it. I wanted to get up and say my piece. You guys are going to do what you do. I know you work very hard. I know you put in a lot of hours. I just think it's unfortunate for our town. That's all.
Thank you. Sir, please raise your, have you spoken before?
Have not spoken.
Please raise your right hand if you swear you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth,
I do.
state your name, spell your last name, tell us where you're from.
Herb Klein, K-L-E-I-N, 9 Oakrest Drive, East Brunswick. As I listen to the developer and the developer's attorney, I hear so much in the way of, seems to be, like signage seems to be talked away, and we're living, I think, in a place where the neighborhood is changing, is going to be changed markedly with all of the development that's going on in Cranberry Road and the surrounding area. The traffic engineer did not address any of that, so traffic is increasing anyway. And with this development, it's really negatively impacting our neighborhood. And I'd like to know if in the future, when a developer comes along and says, well, we're going to give you 24 affordable units, is that the whole ballgame? Because a judge somewhere sitting in court in Middlesex, in New Brunswick, said that, well, this has got to be, East Brunswick hasn't lived up to its commitments for code.
It's a good question, and Mr. Sachs is going to address it at the end of the public portion, because I think you'll find his answer very interesting.
Okay, well, I'd like to just say, before another project comes up, an application given to the planning board, I'd like to say that I think the judge ought to be invited here. It's not the court, it's a judge, it's one person who made that decision. And I think it would be informative for him to hear how hundreds or thousands of people in these communities are affected by the location of those
I
core
will tell you
units.
that the judge has heard East Brunswick's dismay about
Well, he's only heard it.
Mr.
He's
Chairman.
only heard it via the special master.
well, that's Mr. Sachs.
But I think he should hear it for himself. And I think it would be something that he could think about before another proposed project comes up.
More than welcome if you want to reach out and invite him, feel free.
Well, I don't think he would come at mine.
I don't think he would come to mine either, I can guarantee you, matter of fact.
Well, I think that maybe the zoning board or the planning board shouldn't entertain the application unless the judge comes.
That will never happen. But, sir, I'll explain once the public portion. I want to give a history of everything.
Okay, I'm sure you're a lawyer, and I'm sure you'll have an explanation. But I also am surprised, an explanation is really fun, and I love the law. I mean, I'm a very lawful guy, and we're a country of laws. But I think that public sentiment, public comment, that's why we have elections. And I think the judge deserves some feedback. And not only that, I think Middlesex County deserves some feedback about the northern exit. Because it's not just a matter of they take responsibility. Everybody says they take responsibility, but there's no responsibility. I mean, I think that those people ought to appear here and give testimony. And I think they ought to hear us. That's all I have to say.
Yes,
Street. I really sort of wasn't going to speak tonight until something was said by the board that struck a chord in me. And as much as I dislike this proposal, and I do have a considerable amount of disdain for the developer, it is the actions of this planning board that got us there, from the rezoning in 2016. The acreage from 15 to 10 to get to this town green, trying to rezone it, getting us sued, getting this court judge involved, having a court master appointed, and for you to sit there in light of the outrage, in light of the people protesting against this project, to say that the public portion doesn't matter. I, and I'm sure all the residents from East Brunswick and Spotswood, take that very offensively, considering the amount of time we spent away from our families and our life in light of the actions of this board. You don't have to answer, I'm not asking, it's a statement. So vote as you like, but remember, you will be held accountable for everything that has transpired. Thank you.
I have spoken before. I asked a question at one of the very first meetings. I've sat through about 18.
State your name.
Andrea Cosboy.
Okay, and I remind you to under oath.
I now, I'm sorry? K-O-Z-O-D-O-Y. I've sat through about 18 of the 20 hours of testimony. I asked a question at the very beginning. I sat extremely patiently waiting for an answer, and I've yet to hear it. I live on Francis. In order to get off Francis in the morning or in the evening to make a left, there is a dip in the road. It is already a blind spot for people making a left. It's already a safety concern. The way that this has been set up to make a right onto Old Stage Road out of the parking lot, you're now taking a risk of people's lives. It's already a blind spot. So I've waited, I've asked for the specific question to be asked during the traffic study, and I heard nothing. My feeling is I want it on record, because at this point, when someone is injured or killed, I think that someone needs to be held accountable, because you have been told by people who live on Francis, it's already a risk, okay? My other piece is that I understand that this development has to take place and that it's court ordered. What I don't understand is why it has to happen in that spot. At this point, East Brunswick has so many areas that are that need redevelopment. And I know that at one of the prior meetings you had mentioned that if this project didn't come through, that there was always the option of medical buildings being put in that area. To me, I don't understand why this project has to happen in this particular space when there's plenty of other options. And that part couldn't have been, the other options couldn't have been offered.
Just letting you know that the location is also.
Well, as I said, I do want it in writing to say that I have major concerns about the safety of people pulling off of Francis. And as someone who lives in East Brunswick, I feel disappointed that someone who lives in East Brunswick is the person who's looking to develop this project, knowing how upset people are.
I have not spoken before.
So you're aware, these proceedings are recorded and there are verbatim transcripts produced, so you are on record. Your public record, you can get a copy. You have not spoken.
No.
So just please raise your right hand and swear. You swear to tell the truth, told yourself you got.
I do.
State your name, spell your last name, and tell us where you're from.
My name is Diane Charlesworth, Charlesworth. I live at 29 Old Stage Road in Spotswood. And I'm curious, I've listened to the traffic studies, and all of the details have been based on the western portion of Old Stage Road. Why wasn't the eastern portion of Old Stage Road considered in the traffic study? To get out of my driveway now onto Old Stage Road to go to the west is very difficult.
When you say the eastern portion, you're talking about the portion going from, say, Summerhill Road to Main Street?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I live across the street from the Lutheran Church, so I have that activity to contend with as well. Plus I have bushes that my husband won't cut down, but that's a whole other issue. Sometimes in the morning, it takes me a good 5 to 7 minutes to get out of my driveway, and the same thing at rush hour in the afternoon. So why wasn't that part of the road contended with?
Well, first of all, I think what they analyzed, and again, I'll defer to Mr. Watson, is they analyzed the intersection at Old Stage and Summerhill. That's really what needs to be analyzed, is what type of activity is occurring there.
That's correct, the full intersection, all movements of the intersection were analyzed.
But if somebody's coming down Summerhill Road and making a left onto Old Stage Road, was that part taken into consideration?
Yes, that was included in the intersection analysis. That movement.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Very well. Okay, so
I guess not.
2 minutes.
2 minutes is fine.
I'll remind you, you're still under oath, and state your name.
Maureen Levine, Boston Drive. A couple of things. One, the point that you just made that the development was court mandated. Can you be more specific about the portion of the development that was court mandated?
Larry will explain that.
Okay, I'm assuming the court mandated portion is the portion of affordable housing. So that compromises 20% of this development, if I understand correctly, 20% of the 96.
That's the comment.
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
that's
Okay, so that's one portion. I thought we had already discussed the height variances and that there were not going to be any height variances associated with this particular development. When you spoke earlier, Larry, you did speak of if we had to put sloped roofs, there would be something called a bulk variance that would allow for another 3.5 feet of height above the, so can you explain that a little bit further?
I mean, that I can explain now.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a difference between a use variance for height and a bulk variance for height. So if a project, if the height of a project, the height of a building exceeds 10% of the permitted height, it triggers what's called a D6 use variance, height variance. And that requires a whole different testimony, and in fact, would not even be in front of this board. It would be in front of the zoning board.
Right.
All right? If it's a bulk variance that's associated with a site plan application, it can be considered by this board. And this applicant is seeking certain bulk variances as part of the application. So if in fact the applicant is, and I'm not clear where we are on this issue, all right, as to whether or not they're going to provide the sloped roof or the flat roof, but right now I believe the building height is 33 feet? 34 feet?
So it goes in front.
So they're a foot under the maximum height, which is 35 feet.
Okay.
So if in fact they were going to put a sloped roof instead of a flat roof, as long as they keep it below 38.5 feet, because the maximum permitted height is 35 feet, 10% of that is another 3.5 feet, it doesn't trigger a use variance, but it triggers a bulk variance for that additional height.
And you're willing to grant that?
I'm not willing to grant anything.
Okay,
I mean,
you are. Okay.
I don't get to vote first.
No, I know.
Okay, so that's up to this board to grant. Correct.
Okay, so finally, I guess, for myself, I've been to just about every single meeting that we've had on this subject. I've spoken at every single meeting. I'm a resident of the off Old Stage Road, area. I'm impacted by traffic. I think we've spoken about traffic ad nauseum. We all know how it's going to affect, or currently affects, and maybe worsens over the course of time. But my point is that you are court mandated to provide a certain amount of affordable housing. We were lucky enough to get the developer to reduce the number of units from 120 to 96. We started from 3 buildings to 4 buildings, back to 3 buildings with garages without garages, and so on and so forth, and we have sort of changed this up. I would love to see less units. I understand that it's a rental unit. I understand that we have a certain obligation to provide affordable housing. I don't know why we need 100 units in a very small space, in a very congested space. I'm not saying that it's even going to impact traffic or that anything's going to happen. It is a residential area once you cross over that Summerhill line. It is a residential area. Old Stage Road is a pass-through from all the people who want to avoid Route 18. It's a terrible place. Again, I don't know why we need so many units. It's a small space. We can still solve a portion of our affordable housing. There are more affordable housing units going up in other places. So if we could do anything to slope the roofs higher and get a few units taken away and have less parking and a little bit more green space and a little bit more access to Frostwoods, which is utilized by just about everybody who lives in the area. I'm there, I walk my dog there, people walk there, people cycle there, kids are in and out of there all the time. I would rather see some of that space, some decrease in the number of units and an increase in the number of green space. That's all I want to say.
Have you spoken before?
I have not.
And please raise your right hand if you swear to tell the truth. So help you God. State your name.
My name is Arthur Goldenberg.
Spell your last name.
Goldenberg.
And tell us where you're from.
5 Oakcrest Drive in Brunswick. In 2015, I had a stroke. The rescue squad was able to get to me in 10 minutes. I cannot get out of the ShopRite parking lot in 10 minutes between the traffic that is coming from Main Street this way and the traffic that's coming off of Summerhill, because they can make a left on or right on red. You cannot get out in less than 10 to 15 minutes. I'm just saying that increased traffic will put lives at risk.
Yes, I'm asking for 2 minutes. Yes, I'm Cheryl Bass from Spotswood. B is in biscuit, A is in apple, SS is in sawdust and sand. And a little variety. Yes, I understand that the mayor of East Brunswick was ordered not to come to the planning board meeting. Why is it at that point of time that the planning board did not countersuit to have the mayor come? The mayor of Spotswood should come, the mayor of East Brunswick, the townships that are involved should have representation.
The mayor of Spotswood has no jurisdiction here. We don't have regional planning in New Jersey, although I, for one, think we should, but we don't. And Larry, you want to talk about that?
Well, the mayor of East Brunswick is a member of this planning board, and by court order, he is barred from participating in the deliberations on this application.
That was why I'm asking, why wasn't there a countersuit? If I understand correctly, there is a legal term, laches, L-A-C-H-E-S, that says at a certain point of time, you need to take action, otherwise everything is done for. At that point of time, a countersuit should have been ordered so that the mayor, the elected representatives, we elect these people to represent us, that they should be present knowing what the electorate has on their mind.
Well, that was a decision made by the mayor not to challenge it, not to appeal it, and by the township attorney.
Okay, so now we need to, as a group, countersue the county, because Summerhill is the county road. We have to take action against the town because we don't want this project. Is that correct?
First of all, we haven't voted on this project yet, ma'am.
I know, but I only get 2 minutes.
Have you spoken?
Honestly, I don't remember, like Donald Trump.
Well,
I spoke at a freeholder meeting, that I do remember, but I don't, it was about this.
well, let's
Okay.
swear you in.
Okay.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the truth, self you got.
I do.
State your name, spell your last name, tell us your name.
Sandra Lanman, L-A-N-M-A-N. I live on Queens Road over Frost Avenue.
We'll treat you like the first time, so.
Okay, thank you. So everyone has, before me, many people have expressed problems that this development will create on our roadways, and not just at that intersection, but getting out of our driveways, getting out of Frost Avenue, Central Avenue are both nightmares. I'm fortunate enough to be able to take a detour to go north through Whitten Road and Riders Lane, but that left turn off of Frost and the turns from Central are terrible, and
surprised that your traffic study did not show the kind of traffic that's there, because it can take forever just to make a turn there, as other people have said. So my question is, how much ability does this board, or right, does this board have to address those types of concerns? Not just the concerns about the pitch of the roof, or if it's flat, or how many parking spaces are there for electric cars, and the size of the signs, but the other impacts that are going to affect all of us, because that development will completely alter the character of that entire area, that part of town. There's nothing, as far as the eye can see, that's over 2 stories in our area. It's all residential except for those 2 corners. And the building that's been there has been pretty unobtrusive. People will probably agree that it kind of fits in with the neighborhood. It's set back a lot. So how much power, how much authority do you have to deal with all of the impacts? And Dr. Spadafino is here. He certainly knows, his office is on Summerhill, how bad the traffic is there. We're all affected by that. And a lot of this traffic comes from Monroe Township. It comes from the developments that are at the other end of Summerhill, of Old Stage Road. I guess that's the western end of Old Stage Road. There has to be some, I just wonder if there can be consideration about all of these other impacts.
Sachs can answer that.
And I want to just mention another impact. Everybody who lives around and near Frost Woods probably knows that we are overrun with deer. And I wonder if the developer has any plans to deal with the deer that are now going to be even more in our neighborhood. And they are crossing our streets. I meet up with them on morning walks, and we see them there. My yard, I just sprayed my new hostas already because they're going to get eaten. This is going to be a bigger problem. My understanding is that 1,000 trees that are not part of that official Frost Woods protected area are going to have to be cut down for this development. That's what I've heard.
That's not right.
Well, there are quite a few trees. I guess how many?
I believe, Mr. Chairman, I think we put on the record, it's about 30 trees that are within a portion of the site. But the 150-foot buffer, which is really what you're addressing, will be totally preserved and no trees will be.
I think it's going to affect the deer population there with that kind of development there, and it'll push them more into our streets.
Wooded area,
So there are environmental concerns also with water, drainage, etc. Also the buffer, I just want to mention the buffer one time.
You're allowed your opinion, but you can't have your own facts. There's laws that the applicant has to follow. They have to make sure there's
Analysis. This was last year. If it's not true, I appreciate that.
there
Thank you
are
for.
stormwater management rules that the applicant has to follow, and we have to make sure that their plan and their drainage plan works. And they have to have, but you kind of wave your hands, but it's
Right.
important because that's how misinformation is out.
I totally agree with you.
Exactly.
I totally agree, and thank you for clarifying the number of trees, because it was told to me by someone who I thought did an appropriate analysis.
People are telling me that Brunswick is going to burn down now because of this application. So there's been tons of misinformation. And Mr. Sachs will explain to you just how much those kinds of things, like just East Brunswick's too crowded, or our traffic is just too bad, so we'll explain how limited.
Well, I'm interested in how much you can discuss and vote considering those impacts that we're all talking about. Thank you.
Thank you very well. Okay, so now we declare the public portion closed. I thank the members of the public for, generally speaking, being very considerate and understanding. And it's been a long journey. And now the public portion has finally come to an end. I'm going to ask Mr. Sachs to kind of explain explain in some detail actually, what makes this application unique. And then also kind of briefly touch on kind of the general powers that planning boards have and also all kinds of things that we can consider in our vote, but really touch at some length on the uniqueness of this application.
So, thank you, Chairman.
And after that application and that explanation, snicker if you will, but understand that we are citizen volunteers with a job to do and laws that we are sworn to follow also. Mr. Secretary?
Thank you. So let me give a little history of this site because I think it's important. As many of you are aware, this site was developed as an office building back in the 1970s, served an insurance company and some other office uses for many years. Over the last number of years, it has not been fully occupied. I'm not even sure if it's occupied at all right now. All right, so let's fast forward. Well, let me go back before we get to 2015 because 2015 is an important consideration as to why we're here. But I want the members of the public to know, and I think the board members already know this, that this township was probably one of the few townships that was in the forefront of dealing with providing affordable housing. We were COA certified on every round of COA, which is the Council on Affordable Housing. I've been the attorney on this board for 22 years. Some of my colleagues have been here as long as I have. Any residential developments that this planning board approved in the last 22 years always included an affordable housing component. We always applied it. It was either a 15% or 20% set aside for affordable housing. So East Brunswick really, of all the Middlesex County towns, was probably in the forefront of this. There are other towns that I continue to represent in this county that were not in the forefront and in fact were laggards when it came to providing affordable housing. All right, so let's go now to 2015. What happened in 2015 is the Council on Affordable Housing was essentially disbanded by then Governor Christie when he failed to appoint a fifth member to the Council on Affordable Housing. A lawsuit was filed by the New Jersey Builders Association and Fair Share Housing Advocacy Group. The case went to the New Jersey Supreme Court, and essentially what the New Jersey Supreme Court ruled in 2015 was that the determination of how much affordable housing requirements were necessary in each town would now be determined by the court, and in fact would be determined by one judge in each of the 21 counties in the state of New Jersey. So what happened in 2015 is many developers who were able to seize upon contracts for open land, possible sites that could be potentially developed for affordable housing, did so and filed actions in the Superior Court of New Jersey. I'm only concerned about Middlesex County, but I do want to mention something about Middlesex County because, quite frankly, not every county in the state of New Jersey has even come to a final determination on how these municipalities are to act. However, Middlesex County was the one exception. Right? Middlesex County had a judge who has since retired, who took it upon himself to make sure that we were going to be the first county to make sure that these determinations were made. And in the mad scramble to prevent towns from being sued for not having affordable housing plans, being subject to builders' remedies, which result in damages, I would say 95%, maybe with the exception of one municipality in Middlesex County, every Middlesex County town settled their cases. All right, I think the only town that didn't was South Brunswick. South Brunswick tried their case and got slammed by that same judge, in his opinion. All right, so that brings us to now 2016. So between 2015 and 2016, the Township of East Brunswick had to come up with an affordable housing plan. So they had to look at sites to see where housing could be built, and various sites were selected. And in fact, this was one of the sites selected. Now, before you go blame everybody on this board for selecting this particular site, that's not accurate. First of all, some of the members who are sitting here today weren't even on the planning board when that occurred. But, and by the way, I wasn't the attorney who handled that settlement either, right? And we had special counsel for that. All right, but in any event, this site was selected. All right, And this site was approved by the court, it was approved by the then special master, and as a result of that settlement, which was ultimately approved by the planning board and by the township council, we now have a site here at the corner of Summerhill Road and an old stage, which is one of the affordable housing sites. What's happened throughout the state is that developers have piggybacked commercial development along with residential development in all of these sites. So you see very few sites that are just strictly residentially developed sites. And this site is no exception. So this site does have a commercial component. This site was in a commercial zone to begin with. It was in an office professional zone, although that's not what's being proposed here. And the zoning ordinance was changed in 2016 to accommodate this use. Now, it may not be the use that we wanted to see, and it may not be the use that any of us ever envisioned, and I don't think it was, but that's what we have in front of us right now. So what happens after 2016? We have the new administration that comes in, Mayor Cohn comes in, new council, and last summer, and with the blessing of this planning board, all right, we decided that we were going to change the ordinance in this zone. And that was probably at the urging of many of you who are sitting out there today. And we attempted to rezone this property, which would have resulted in a radically different application that you have in front of you this evening. The developer saw fit to challenge that, filed a lawsuit in September or October of last year. We had a hearing on this, and the judge essentially said, A, you're in violation of your affordable housing settlement that you reached in 2016 because you're changing the rules right now. And secondly, your mayor is no longer allowed to participate in hearings because the mayor did make public comments, particularly while the zoning board application was pending. All right, and I don't agree with what the judge did. I don't think he should have barred the mayor from participating, but he did. He also appointed a special master. I don't believe that the special master should have been appointed, but he did. And that's where we are this evening. In the interim, you did have another application that was in front of the zoning board, which was a different application. That did require a height variance, and it did require 120 units. So that's what we're confronted with right now. We are confronted with a judge who has determined already that when we attempted to change the ordinance to probably have something more palatable for the municipality, we were violating the intent of our affordable housing settlement of 2016. Mr. Chairman, what the board can and cannot do in its deliberations, I know this board knows what it has, what you can and cannot do, but to the members of the public, let me give you a brief education as to what a planning board can do and cannot do. And it differs from a zoning board. A planning board is a board of permitted uses. The only thing that a planning board can approve is a use that's permitted in the zone. This application is permitted in the zone. The commercial aspect of it and the residential aspect of it. If in fact this zone did not permit it, it would have gone to the zoning board and they would have to grant a use variance. This board cannot grant use variances, and that's why we can only deal with permitted uses. This board can also deal with subdivisions. That's not part of this application. This board can deal with bulk variances, which are what we call dimensional variances. For instance, if a building is violating a setback line, that's a bulk variance. The height in this situation would be a bulk variance. The number of signs would be a bulk variances. Those are what we call de minimis variances. They're pretty much granted on just about every application, all right? Sometimes they're not. Sometimes that's a reason to turn it down. But I believe the bulk variances which are being sought in this case are not substantial bulk variances. In terms of traffic, I know there's been a lot of discussion about traffic. I'll reiterate again, and I apologize to the woman who, Mrs. Newman. I apologize if I was a little harsh on you, because I understand you may not have been able to make every meeting.
But everybody else was
I understand.
saying the issue was not been settled.
I understand, but let me reiterate again what I've said at a number of meetings. Middlesex County has the ultimate jurisdiction over Summerhill Road. It's a county road. This plan was submitted to Middlesex County even prior to coming before this board. All right, so they had gotten input already from Middlesex County. One of the attachments to the staff report is an approval from Middlesex County as to the configuration that's been laid out here, which includes the multiple entrances on Summer Hill Road, includes some of the lane widenings, some of the other intersection improvements. But that's all, that was approved by Middlesex County even before this application started. I think the approval was granted in November of 2018. We didn't even start hearing this application until early this year. We required the applicant to verify the traffic study and the traffic report with our engineer. I don't need a traffic study to tell me that this is a bad intersection. It's a bad intersection, we know. It's one of the worst in town. Unfortunately, our town is saddled with a lot of bad intersections. We are at the crossroads of the center of the state. We are at the crossroads of areas that have been overdeveloped in years in other towns, in South Brunswick, in Monroe Township. By the way, East Brunswick has done a very good job of trying not to get overdeveloped. All right? This board, some of the members who are sitting here, actually adopted a 6-acre zoning that's still in effect on the other side of the New Jersey Turnpike to prevent massive residential development from occurring. If we hadn't done that, we probably would have had several thousand other residential units developed over there. The governing body of this town acquired Heavenly Farms to prevent 800 units from being built. So,
Tamarack Hollow.
yeah, and Tamarack Hollow. You know, so, and by the way, many of the members who are here were all part of that. So, it's unfair for members of the public to first of all say it's a fait accompli. We've sat here for 6 hearings. The board still has to make a decision. Whatever their decision is, their decision will be. But I know that their decision will be guided by proper land use principles. The fact that this is a permitted use, the fact that we have hopefully vetted out traffic issues, drainage issues, landscaping issues, lighting issues. We've listened to all the planning testimony. You know, they're going to do what they need to do in terms of hearing that testimony and making their determination. But this is an application that is unlike many other applications that we've had. I will tell you that we have never been under the microscope of the court on any other application in my 22 years as being on this planning board. So I hope I've answered some of your questions. I hope I've answered some of the planning board members' questions, all right? And ultimately, it's going to be a determination that has to be made by this board. Another question that came up, I think it was Mrs. Lamb, wanted to know what's our recourse to deal with traffic anywhere? And I think the chairman was giving me too much credit. I don't think I can answer that question because every application is associated with a traffic study that is specific for that site. We really don't have regional traffic planning in the state of New Jersey. I wish we did, but we don't. So what happens in East Brunswick is going to have impacts in Spotswood. What happens in Spotswood is going to have impacts in East Brunswick. And what happens in Monroe is going to have impacts in East Brunswick, which we see already. We know people cut through Spotswood to get to Route 18 from Monroe. And probably from Marlboro and other towns. You know, that's just the way it is. We know people come down Old Stage Road from Old Bridge, right? And to avoid Route 18 and then somehow get to New Brunswick. So, but unfortunately, there is no regional planning tool in place. We have to rely upon the traffic study that's provided. We have to rely upon our very qualified professionals. They've represented this board for all the years I've been here. They do an excellent job, and I know they did an excellent job on reviewing everything here. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll get off my soapbox. Is there any questions the board members have?
Well, thank you, Mr. Sachs. It wasn't a soapbox, it was something that I asked you to provide to the public about the uniqueness of this application. And it's been frustrating for me over the years that I've been here that we couldn't say, you know, boy, our roads are really getting crowded, and even though this application is 4 miles away from this intersection, you know, it's kind of all going into the same pot called East Brunswick. Some of you may have read in the paper or heard on the radio that the Edison School Board is considering taking a suit and taking action against the township of Edison. because they're saying, you know, look at us, and you keep approving these houses. How are we going to educate these people, these children that we have a responsibility to educate? I hope the suit gets legs, because I think it makes a lot of sense. You can't, the most frustrating thing about being a planning board member for me is that we have to look at everything in such a microscope, that we have to have blinders on, that we can look at this application and how it affects this intersection, but not the intersection, 2 intersections down, but that's how I have to go to get wherever I'm going. And like I said, I've lived in this town all my life, and I live in East Brunswick and I work in Woodbridge. It's a giant pain in the neck for me to get to Woodbridge every day. I mean, Woodbridge isn't that far. So these are the frustrations that we all feel as residents. The Edison suit, I hope, gets some traction, but it's always been frustrating for me and hard for me to explain and make people understand that the limited amount of, I don't want to say power, that's the wrong word, but how much, the limited amount of that we can do, that we can honestly do, and what we can consider in making our decisions. You know, I think Mr. Sachs will tell you, New Jersey is a pretty pro-developer state, and we can look at 100 reasons for that. But that's always been a frustration. I know, for me, certainly, I know the rest of the board members. I'm going to take a 2-minute break because I have to, and I'll be right back, and I'll allow the other members to speak.
Mr. Sachs answered.
Sure. If there's any other questions for Mr. I can ask them now, but I'm going to excuse myself.
What is the ramification in the event, if we have this with the zoning board, you will. Sorry. What is the ramifications down the road if it gets turned down?
Okay, well, and this is, well, I'll talk about it generally, any application. If any application gets turned down, it's certainly within the power of the applicant to file what's called a prerogative writ lawsuit, which would challenge the decision of the board as being arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable. Those are the 3 terms. That's the legal standard. So if the application is turned down, and who knows, maybe the applicant won't, but the applicant could file a lawsuit against the planning board seeking to determine that this decision was arbitrary, capricious, unreasonable. I'll add a 4th thing, not supported by the facts. All right, but that's the recourse. That has to occur within 45 days of the memorialization of a resolution, and then it's up to a court, to a judge, to determine, based upon a review of the record consisting of all of the transcripts, the record consisting of all of the submissions that were made, whether or not the board acted arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable. If the court determines that it has, it could reverse that decision. If the court determines that it has not, then the denial would stand.
Okay, one of the other points that's usually made is any of the agreements that might have been made during the course of the application, when it gets reversed, are eliminated, and the applicant then has much freer reign.
Well, the applicant in this situation revised the plan to have 1 less building. So conceivably, they could seek to go back to the 120 units. That could happen, sure. And I will also state that this particular application is under a microscope. We know that. I think I've stated that.
Thank you.
Well, I think, why don't we do this? Since the chairman is not, we'll wait.
I don't want to break this up.
And the public portion is closed, so let's wait for our chairman to come back and we'll continue. Can I entertain a motion to adjourn for 1 minute until the chairman comes back?
I'll make a motion.
Second? We stand adjourned.
Walking through it and then go fast, and then...
You can. We had one outstanding item. We asked the applicant to, once again, look at the variances that they requested for their signs. I think I made my position pretty clear. Mr. Himmelman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to have the applicant and if necessary, the engineer run through the signage variances, and we're prepared to address that. And if you want to continue.
Let me just make one comment, Mr. Chairman. So we took the opportunity during the break to work as closely as we're able to with the corporate representatives of both CBS and Chase Bank in an attempt to significantly reduce the requirements for sign variances. So we have some ideas on how we can eliminate some of the signs and reduce the sizes of others, and Brett will go over that in detail. So we show up on the exhibit here.
Sure, again, for the record, Brett Scabinetz with Dynamic Engineering. So there were two items I know we were discussing at hand, number of signs in total in the buildings is one of the variances. 7 are being asked for, where only 3 are allowed. There would be 2 for the CVS pharmacy and 1 for the Chase Bank. So for the Chase Bank, we can eliminate that sign on the back side of the building that faces towards the residential buildings, and Chase is willing to remove that. What they would like in its place, though, is above, there's a doorway, and at the threshold of the door is glass surrounding the door. Just above the door, they would like a non-illuminated, essentially would be about 2 foot by 4 foot, the width of the door by about 2 foot in height, essentially a placard right above the door that says Chase. It would essentially be a notation that it's the Chase doorway. If you're driving in from that back side, I think it makes sense, if you're not coming in from the front, to see that that's the entrance to the Chase Bank. So again, non-illuminated, take the main sign of 37 square feet on that side, that's illuminated, is removed. Okay. As far as the CVS pharmacy is concerned, there were 5 signs there. There are 2 drive-through pharmacy signs that are smaller in size. They are at 17.7 square feet. And then we had proposed 3 CVS pharmacy signs. Each of those was 74 square feet in size. Keep note that obviously the total area of those signs is compliant, it's really just a number. In fact, we were asking for more than the 2 allowed for this building. We are looking to remove the signage on the Old Stage Road side of the building, which means there's a drive-through pharmacy sign on that side of the building and a CVS pharmacy sign on that side of the building. So obviously that has the most impact on residents, and honestly from the standpoint of visibility coming through the intersection, the least impactful when it comes to recognition of that building. Whereas coming from, say, the east, heading westbound on Old Stage, you're approaching the intersection, the sign that's on the face of the building towards Summerhill Road, that CVS pharmacy sign is appropriate. And then if you're heading down Summerhill from the north, heading towards the intersection, seeing the CVS pharmacy, I think on that side of the building is certainly appropriate as well. Plus, we do believe that at least 1 drive-through pharmacy sign that would be placed on that northerly face, or again, if you're heading south on Summerhill Road, is appropriate. Because counter, I think, to one of the board members' comments, and that everyone has a phone and so forth, there are the situations where CVS pharmacies don't have a drive-through lane. Not all of them do. Yes, it's becoming more prevalent, but there is a situation where they don't, and it is an identification or a marker that is there, especially for someone that is in a rush to get to drop off, get a prescription for their child, coming from a pediatrician's office, which is probably the most used aspect of these drive-up lanes for their medication. So we would look to have 1. So what that does is it does keep a variance for the CVS pharmacy, and then we are keeping 3 signs now versus the 5 that we had originally proposed.
Let me ask our planner, do you see this compromise as a substantial reduction in signage?
Based on the testimony that has been provided, it looks like for Chase, they have reduced the number of signs. They are now proposing 1, and 1 they're proposing above the door that seems to be about 4 square feet non-illuminated.
It may be a 2 by 4, so say 8 square feet, but non-illuminated, and it's just essentially affixed to the glass above the door.
Okay. So technically, it would still be a wall sign, but a reduced sign. And for the CVS, it is a corner location. So based on that, I believe they are permitted 2 signs, and they are trying to reduce it from proposed 5 to 3. We had recommended that signs along the areas, especially the proposed residential area where it's not required, not be proposed, and I think they are trying to mitigate that by removing those signs. As per the drive-through pharmacy sign, which is making the 3rd sign, I do agree the applicant's concern that sometimes the drive-through pharmacy is not very visible, and having a sign that provides or indicates that there is a drive-through at this pharmacy would kind of mitigate some of the safety concerns that comes with for pharmacy signs. Overall, I would tend to see that the applicant has made an effort to remove the number of signs that are being proposed.
Thank you. Yeah, now I know I can only speak for myself, but that would satisfy my concern about it.
Okay. Thank you,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to bring up one other point as well, which I know we generally don't do with planning board applications in this town, but if this application is approved, I would like it to be contingent upon the execution of a developer's agreement, all right, between the Township of East Brunswick and the developer. And I'll tell you why I state this. I've seen it in other municipalities where there's a multi-use project, commercial and residential, and one portion of the project gets built and the other portion never gets built, and that's a problem.
We have no issue with that, Mr.
I agree with that, too.
All right, so that'll be subject to, I will have the editorial license to prepare that developer's agreement, subject to review by Mr. Himmelman, but I will make a standard developer's agreement.
We agree.
Let me just, before I go to the members, I ask them to take some action on this application. Is there any outstanding, there's been a lot of stuff thrown around. So let me ask staff, is there anything that's still outstanding that we need to deal with before we consider this application?
From a technical aspect, engineering-wise, no. I think there were a couple of items that I marked down in my notes that we may want to add to the conditions of the approval. I don't know if this is the time to discuss those, or if you want to wait until...
No, we could discuss it now, John. That's
So one of the things was, we had discussion and testimony regarding the access to the park, and that there was testimony, I believe, that a legal document would be prepared regarding the access itself and also maintenance. There was a very technical engineering request. There's an inlet in one of the driveways on Old Stage Road that is a potential, I'll call it a hazard, but it's an annoyance more than anything. And I think the applicant agreed to move that outside of the drive lane. There's been discussion about the charging, the EV charging stations. I think that's been covered. And also, I think the applicant agreed to add a bike rack at the commercial, at least at the CVS.
Yes, correct.
I just want to make sure that that was covered.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Okay.
And the applicant agrees to all those conditions.
Mr. Watson?
Nothing further on my end.
Good. Anything else? I think we heard from our plan.
Nothing further. Just to kind of go back on the sign, I believe for the number of signs now, the permitted are 3 for this site, and what they're proposing would be considered, 3 for CVS and 1 or 2 for Chase. Just
Mr. Sachs?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think I've covered everything I needed to state tonight.
Okay, so,
I think at this point.
sure, what I'd like to do now is entertain a motion for this application. If it gets a second, it'll be moved in second. Then I would like to go to each member and ask for your opinion prior to your finish.
That sound good, Zephyr?
I will move the approval of this application. I will save my comments until the end.
I'll make a second.
It's been moved and seconded. Now we're at the discussion phase. Mr. Brown, since I looked at you first, I'm going to go to you first.
I spent a considerable amount of time on, as everyone did with this application. As we know, there have been extensive reports, professional analysis, hearing transcripts on times after we had our hearings. We would then get the transcripts, hundreds of pages, and I would sit there and read them. And I have to say that there are many parts of this application that I do not like. The traffic that may potentially impact the surrounding areas, the on-site circulation, the density of the proposed site. But this was addressed this evening, and sitting here as a board member, it requires me, and I believe all of us, to separate the emotional and personal feelings regarding an application and instead review the proposed development based upon the municipal land use law and the East Brunswick ordinances. Our governing body saw fit to zone this site as a town green zone. It's this ordinance that we now have to look at. I reviewed everything that the applicant put forward. They originally filed an application to build 5 three-story residential buildings, totaling 120 residential apartments, 2 pad sites, one for the CVS and one for the Chase Bank. Our governing body found through the ordinance that that proposed site plan and development as originally presented by the applicant was a permitted use. Thankfully, we're not being asked to vote on that application, as the ordinance allows more density, more building structure than the present one that is being put forth this evening. After hearing from this board, the public, and the consulting with the professionals, I believe the applicant revised its proposed site plan. They reduced the residential components to 4 buildings with a total of 96 residential units. The pad sites remain of the CVS and the Chase Bank. By doing so, the density is reduced. The site layout permits better, but not ideal, on-site vehicular circulation and parking. As we also heard, the applicant has agreed to provide 14 dedicated spaces on the private property for the adjoining Crosswoods. And as this evening we heard, compliance with the recently enacted electric charging station ordinance, which I believe provides 6 spots as opposed to now the original 1 that was being presented. You also indicated as the applicant that he worked with staff. They originally proposed with the flat roof being white. Now we're going with more of a pitched roof, which I think is a better roof design. While I applaud the East Brunswick and Spotswood communities expressing their concerns with regard to this proposed development and the impact it will have on the surrounding areas, I'm constrained to balance these expressions of developmental opposition with the testimony of not only the applicant's professionals, but the planning board's professionals and the controlling East Brunswick ordinance and the state's municipal land use law. The application, despite my personal distaste, meets the ordinance. The application, despite my personal disfavor, meets the municipal land use law. My trepidation also is if this revised, lower density application is denied, the applicant will appeal the matter to the Superior Court. It will subject the taxpayers to substantial cost, and it will permit the applicant to potentially modify its plan and revert back to its original submission of more residential units and more density. The applicant submitted an original developmental plan consistent with the ordinance. The applicant then worked with professional staff, listened to the public's input, and amended and revised its developmental plan. While these conditions may be less than desirable for the surrounding community, developing this site with a cooperating applicant, amicable professionals, and with the input of the governing administration is more prudent than being court-ordered to proceed in a certain fashion, which potentially would be with blinders as to the community. I find that the application is consistent with the municipal land use law and the principles supported by planning and engineering, and for that reason, I reluctantly would vote yes on this application.
Thank you, Mr. Rob. Mr. Sachs, should we call each?
Well, yeah, we could do that. So why don't I guess we've called Mr. Brobman.
Mr. Brobman.
So why don't we call the next person?
So, Mr. Brobman,
That would be a yes.
that would be a yes vote.
For those reasons.
I'd like to now call on Mr. Keppel.
Mr. Heppel?
Thank you. Now, this is a real tough one, so to speak. We all care very much about our community, and occasionally we get an application that I'll say is difficult. That's not the way things work. We're adults. We have to go by the law. The judge, when they reacted to our request to change the zoning there and possibly, move a project, say, with the affordable housing to another area, and showed his disdain for that by saying no and having the special master here with us. So obviously that is not the way the judge wanted things to go, and you almost feel like, well, maybe they felt the mayor might, have influence on us because of his comments. Well, the way the judge is handling it makes it quite clear where this would end up. Okay, I have always been very concerned about the traffic trying to get in and out of the project on Summer Hill Road, making the left. I just see accidents. It bothers me immensely. But what do you call it? The county didn't have any problem with this. Our police department reviewed it. Okay, they don't have any problem with it. I think they're both wrong. They do it for a living. I don't. But you pay people to do the job, and if they feel it's reasonably safe, we basically have to go along with this. For the developer, and again, as a career banker, I would normally watch out for my customer, and I'd say, I'm a little concerned, how's CVS going to do in there? Are they going to be successful, or are you going to have an empty building at some point? Okay, the same may go for Chase. It's not an easy place to get in, not an easy place to get out of. And if he's not successful, what ends up happening there? But that's not what I'm here for tonight. I've really had a difficult time with this. It bothers me very, very much, but but I'm going to vote yes, because it is the right thing to do. And I will give the applicant credit, making numerous changes. The profitability on his project, not that anybody here cares, but it's going to be much less with these changes. So he has done it, and I thank you for that. So that's my reason.
Thank you, Mr. Chappell. And I would just let my fellow members know, don't feel compelled to say anything or make a statement. You prefer just to state your vote on the purpose of that. Or once and as proceeds forward.
Mr. Marshall?
Thank you. So, I know the folks that are sitting here, my colleagues have way more experience than I do. But however, it is no doubt a tough decision for all of us. I would agree. In front of me, I have an application, and I have some facts in front of me. The engineering facts that are in front of me don't have anything alarming that would stop me from, proceeding forward with my decision. The legal advice that I've heard so far also is pointing towards a favorable application in front of me which does not, it has a permitted use from East Brunswick Township perspective, and also has the least amount of variances that have been addressed by the applicant in order to accommodate the lighting, the fixtures, the traffic, both in and out of the premises. I don't like the application as it is. It does, has some negatives to it, but based on what I'm here to assess the application is the permitted use, land use of this parcel, and also the engineering advice that I'm getting, and also the legal advice I'm getting. So my vote, although very reluctantly, would be a yes as well. Thank you.
From my vantage point, from the very beginning, I kind of see this application as being a terrible application. It always was. But it's not because of that this situation changes. There's been a cloud over this whole application from the very beginning. And the cloud came over because of legal requirements that oftentimes put you in a place you do not want to be. And I can only tell you that that is certainly the way I felt about this in the very beginning. It's a legal situation where it's just an awful sandwich to be being asked to eat. And as much as I would like to say that I can just not eat that sandwich, the fact is that the ramifications for letting it go and what would be happening to the town could be far worse. The final, as I looked and I weighed the positive and the negative criteria on this application and what made sense in one side and on the other, there was almost nothing on the positive side, to be blunt. But those two things or three things that were on the positive side weighed so heavily that they made all the other line items on the negative side seem somewhat inconsequential. Namely, when the town made the decision in 16-20 to turn this piece of property into a rural into a town green, that set the tone. We wouldn't even be here tonight if the town hadn't changed that to a town green. That's it. That's the hook in this whole thing. And it really does leave this board with almost no opportunity to disagree. If we turn it down, and you've heard it from our attorney, the applicant goes ahead and files an appeal, and for all you know, the last 7 nights we've had till 11:30, 12 o'clock at night go away, and the applicant can virtually almost sometimes do whatever they want. An awful, awful situation, but it's one that we don't really have any control over on this board tonight. So with that said, I would vote yes, but it's not my favorite night.
Not taking emotion out of everything, I think it comes down to something very simple here, in my mind. I don't feel this is safe. And I vote no. I don't care enough. That's it.
I have the highest amount of respect for the members of this board. We sit through many, many applications, and we are all well-trained. We are required to attend classes and so on. So I have the highest respect for the people that sit up here, and they're all volunteers. I'm probably one of the only people that gets paid to do the job as your administrator of the town. This is an added duty that I take honor to as an appointee of the mayor. I just want to clear up some things and make sure people understand. The current council that's at the township did not vote on this zoning change. I want you to be clear. The one member that is on the council, that is still remaining on the council, voted against changing it to the TG zone. Okay? So as I heard people come up and talk about the change by the council, you have to look at the council that was in at that particular time. Okay? I hate things that are misrepresented or misleaded, and I know some of you here have come to my office and we've had conversations, not on this topic, but other topics, and I really hope and I seek for people to understand when they come in to the office, whether the answer is yes or no from me or from one of my departments. So as our attorney said before, the current council tried to change the zone, and we were denied. And that denial was done by a judge in New Brunswick. And I have the utmost respect for people that become judges as well. I have the utmost respect for all you people that have come out 7 or 8 nights for this. But also keep in mind, these people are volunteers, and they come out 7 or 8 nights who are only at this application. We've also had to look at other applications in between. So to our board members here, while you were coming out maybe every other Wednesday, some consecutive Wednesdays, we've been out every Wednesday for months. So I have the utmost respect for the members on this board, their volunteerism. Their heart is all in the right place. Our staff has been working diligently on this project alone. So, utmost respect for you as residents. You wanted your voice to be heard. You came out. You were tenacious. You came out repeatedly. I've worked in other towns where it starts out like this, and by the time we get to this point, there's 4 people in the audience. So I applaud you for keeping up with coming out to the meetings. And I think you've all now become better educated to the process.
As much as the applicant has tried to comply and do many things to try to satisfy this board, my point of view had to stand with the fact that if the applicant under this circumstance wants to put up something on that property, let him comply with all the variances without any changes, all the rules without any changes. So I'm voting no.
That voted yes.
Yes, and Chairman Joe.
Yeah, my board, for all of them, are far brighter than I am, and far more articulate than I am. I always called on Mr. Brockman first because he's one of the smartest guys I know, and he cares deeply about this town. And I wanted to make sure that his opinions got on the record. So I'm not going to rehash what's already been said. I'm just going to say a few things. First, I think it's important that Mr. Friscolo pointed out that the council that approved this and put us in this pickle are no longer serving as council people, with the exception of Councilman Jim Wendell. And Jim Wendell voted against it when he was on council. And thankfully, Jim Wendell is still a member of this council. But I sit here, and I've chaired this board for about 20 years. I don't remember the exact number of years. And this is the first time that I really feel boxed in. And shame on the court for putting us in this situation. And shame on that judge for forcing members of the Township of East Brunswick to go against what they feel is in the best interest of the town, because they know because this judge has been pretty vocal about his dissatisfaction with the way this application has been handled by this town up till now, that it may put this town in even a worse position. And that's not something that I'm willing to do. And trust me, this application has weighed heavy on me. I've had many sleepless nights over it. It is without a doubt the worst yes vote that I'm ever going to cast. But in weighing the entire town and what this could do potentially to the town if we don't support it, and the decision leaves this planning board and goes back to the courts, I reluctantly have to vote yes. I thank you all for your participation. I thank you for your courtesies. I thank my fellow board members for all their hard work. No matter which way you voted, you're my friends, I respect you. I thank the staff, and I appreciate the applicant and what the applicant would.
Is that it?
I vote.
Everybody voting?
No, excuse me, let me just comment. I know, Mr. Chairman, you're voting yes?
I'm voting yes.
Okay. Mr. Schmidt is our second alternate because we have 9 votes, which is all that's required for a planning board hearing. He doesn't get to vote. But Mr. Schmidt, if you want to state something for the record, I know you've participated in all these hearings, so.
Yes, I did, and unfortunately, it's a sad night, the way I view this. 6-7 months we're listening to testimony from the applicant, from engineers, from attorneys, and so on and so forth, and the public. And it's just absolutely mind-boggling to me that in this room, the only person or group that is in favor of this application is the applicant. Not one, at one time there's 400 or 500 people that came to the application and even hearing, and now of course it's come down to a lesser sum. It is amazing that not one person has spoken favorably on this application. Not one.
Okay, so you're voting yes every time.
And I've seen other applications where there have been objectors who have said something positive and others negative. This has been a total negative response to an application, and I don't have to go into the reasons why, because it's been hashed out and mentioned constantly by the people that have spoken here. And I just find it also very interesting that this is an application where the public and the people who live in the area, which includes me, actually have a better handle on the area and the effect on the area, especially with regard to traffic, than the experts do. They understand it because they live it and they see it. You don't have to be a traffic expert to know that this application, which will bring in a couple of 100 cars from 96 families and traffic in and out from a busy pharmacy and a bank, is going to adversely impact the area. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't care what the experts say. As far as the fact that, it's been mentioned the county approved it, well, the county's wrong. The county made a mistake on this one. They've made mistakes in the past. Maybe they'll make mistakes in the future. But it's a very, very troubling application. It's been very stressful on all the board members. It's been stressful on me. People are unhappy with it, but there are constraints where you have a court that is breathing down the necks of the planning board, which is really unfortunate. I've never seen anything like it before, and I hope not to see it again. So there's any way that I would be able to support this. Thank you. Thank you for all coming out.
Mr. Chairman, the application is approved.
The application is
Noted board